May you take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to you here in the room at the Kampala Serena Hotel, and those of you joining us online via Zoom. We want to welcome you, plus those watching us across the different television channels on UBC and NBS. We want to welcome you to this national dialogue on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Our theme for these 3 days is unlocking Uganda's potential in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We are also talking about making the Africa Continental Free Trade Area work for Africa. And in a very special way, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, recognize our chief guest, the Honorable Minister of State for Industry, the Honorable David Bahati. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. May I also, who is also, by the way, a co-convener alongside the United Nations Development Program. And so may I, in a very special way, recognize the presence of the UN Resident Coordinator, Ms. Susan Ngogi Namondo. Thank you so much for joining us. And also, in a very special way, our host and co-host, the Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, Ms. Elsie Atafwa, and her Deputy Sheila Ngatia. Please do stand for recognition. Our UN family friends who are here, I've seen my friend Antonio Querido from the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO Uganda, and Mr. Dekeni from the UN Women. There you go. I could go on and on, but in this room, ladies and gentlemen, is the private sector, and they're of course represented by the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, who are represented here by Stephen Asimwe, who I see here. We have several members of the fraternity, the private sector fraternity. We also have several government officials in this room from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, who will be part of this conversation this afternoon. If you're joining us, this is a 3-day conversation from the 10th today until the 12th, where we will be looking at the opportunities therein for Uganda and how we can unlock the potential for Uganda to benefit from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Some brief perspective before I run a video on the Futures Program. In March 2018, the African countries signed a landmark trade agreement, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, a legal instrument establishing a free trade area among the African Union member states. What's amazing about this is that this agreement opened up a market of $3 trillion, worth $3 trillion. And by the way, it's a growing target. And so I want to let you know that 3 trillion is what we have at the moment, the market worth at the moment, but this is a growing number. If you look at the statistic next year, and economists like Palani will be telling us that these numbers keep growing year on year. It also provided a market of 1.3 consumers on our continent, representing the world's largest trade area. The world's largest trade area. So if you're joining us and you're watching at home, we're already building your mind into the opportunities therein on this continent. The continent has a total GDP of over 3.4 trillion US dollars. And on January 1st, 2021, the free trade trading officially commenced under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that is where we begin the conversation this afternoon. What are the opportunities for Uganda? Where are the opportunities for our mothers, our women at home, who we know are the bulk of the informal trade in Uganda? Where are the opportunities for our young people? We are creating a single market. We are looking to the different opportunities to collaborate with our partners across the continent. And the issue, I'm sure the Honorable Minister will be speaking to, of eliminating the tariffs, the non-trade barriers. All right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to turn your eyes to a video we're going to run. And this will set the tone for what the conversation we're actually currently having. So let's have the video and then we'll return to our opening remarks. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking at jobs. We are looking at markets. We are looking at opportunities for our innovators, our young men and women who every single day are building different platforms and, of course, connecting us. So we will be speaking to the single African market of over 1.3 billion people. But we must also discuss how to formalize our informality. And that's really the conversation we will be looking at. And please do look at some of the literature we've provided. It has a lot of content that we should be sharing with our people. Please do share on your platforms. Let everyone know that the opportunities are abound on this continent. But I'm not the one giving speeches. And since I have seen one of the hosts here, allow me invite our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Ms. Geraldine Sally, to come and make welcome remarks. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Is it working now? Yeah, wonderful. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellencies in the House from all our countries, the head of resident representatives, Ms. Elsie Atafua, the members from other government parastatals, and don't worry about the order of my protocols. I'm still learning and I'm getting some experience in the order of protocols. And members from the UNDP team, members from the ministries that are tasked with the forum of AFCTA, my Honorable Minister, Honorable David Bahati, and all our ambassadors and representatives from the different trade areas and UN areas, all protocols are observed. My job is very simple in terms of welcoming you all, because what I know is bottom line is that we have got a lot of work to do as a big African market. We're now looking at ourselves as an African market. When I was sent down to serve as the PS of Trade, Industries and Cooperatives, the first thing that came to my mind was that I'm going to actually be a marketeer for just Ugandan products and sell them across Africa and sell them across the other continents of the world. That was for me like the initial statement in my life, thinking that, you know, that is exactly what I was going to do. But when I got into the ministry and I started having different conversations with the commissioners and all the other technical team members, it was a very interesting conversation, because now they broke it down into different zones, different trade zones, treaties. I mean, they started speaking English I've never heard before. All this English was to do with how Africa has zoned themselves out to benefit from the sub-markets of Africa as well as the markets. Now, we had the East African community, and that one was very easy for me because I remember it in my primary school. And those days it was just 3 of them. But of course, it has evolved, as we all know. And then we were talking about COMESA, and just as I was getting ready for COMESA, it became it became AFCTA, and I was hearing it for the first time, which means that Africa really wants to become a common marketplace. So the will is there. But of course, then I went on to hear things like, well, our maize is not going to the next door country. But I was thinking, so what does that mean for our treaties? Then I began to hear that the milk and the eggs are all not going. So to me, it then meant that much as we sit here in most of these conferences and summits, we actually need to have the willpower to implement the things we discuss when we discuss them. So we can be here and have all the niceties. I will address you as your highnesses and your honorable members and everybody. But for as long as when we go back to our homes and countries, we do not have the willpower to implement the things that we have discussed, it then becomes pointless. So while we are deliberating the implementation journey of this very big African market, which is about 1.5 billion Africans, this is a powerful market. It's a powerful market because you can see it's almost the size of India. India, for them, they can actually absorb anything that they produce in a flash because they are big in numbers and they protect their local markets. So they have the power to grow anytime. So, but when we are talking about us as Africa, we then begin to act like we are boundaries. And these boundaries are really artificial boundaries because if you think about it, we are one color, one people. These boundaries were left by someone else, not us. Whoever talked about partitioning of Africa. But really, we should really dissolve those boundaries and act as if we are one country and we are going to be powerful in numbers. Later on, I shall be presenting and supporting my statements. But I think as for the program, Mr. Mugisha, I think for me, I'm just going to be, do I go straight into the presentation or do I just, because the program sort of changed. It's afterwards. I've been guided. So as we are going through all these deliberations, they mean a lot, and especially if we have invested 3 days of our working lives into this discussion. The journey started years ago, before some of us were even before we started real serious work. But now we're actually here to carry the baton and make sure that we try to do the implementation where we can all benefit and grow our respective economies. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I hand over for the next item. I welcome you all, and I wish you all very good deliberations. Yes, I wish you all very good deliberations, and I'm hoping that we take away things that we can actually implement with the political will as well as the financial will. We invest everything that we have in terms of getting the results that we want and the results that we have invested in. Thank you very much.
We can do better than that. Another round of applause for the Permanent Secretary. Our chief guest, we do have quite a sizable audience online that's joining us, including some of our key stakeholders. Among them is the President of the Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, President Olive Chigongo. But as I speak, I think I saw the Minister of State also arrive. So, Honorable Minister, thank you so much for joining us. I have also been informed that the Honorable Minister, Bahati, is excited about this conversation for 3 days. He's committed to be here with us for 3 days. So you don't get that kind of commitment from anywhere. That tells you how important this conversation is and how committed as a minister he is to drive this conversation. So the next speaker is somebody who I call an advocate for our women, youth, and Uganda at large. I don't know any other person who is so proud about Uganda's tourism, other than myself, than Miss Elsie Atafwa. So ladies and gentlemen, the UNDP resident representative, please do come and make your welcome remarks. You're most welcome. We can do better, really. Another round of applause.
Thank you, Maurice, for that very generous introduction. I am very much Ugandan, so I have to promote our beautiful pearl. Honorable David Bahati, Minister of State for Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, in charge of industry. Honorable Harriet Ntabazi, State Minister for Trade, Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. We also have online His Excellency Wamkele Mene, Secretary General, African Continental Free Trade Area, Her Excellency Susan Ngongi Namondo, UN Resident Coordinator, P.S. Geraldine Sally, heads of government agencies and departments, members of the diplomatic corps, leaders of the private sector, civil society, colleagues from the United Nations, NICFAO, IOM, UN Women, I know WHO, and others are online. Distinguished guests here, online viewers on television, ladies and gentlemen, let me simply say, all protocols observed. I'm delighted to be part of this African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCTA dialogue. I thank the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives under the leadership of Honorable Francis Mwebeza and Permanent Secretary Geraldine for inviting the United Nations Development Program to co-host this dialogue, and by extension, our United Nations family. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, Africa accounts for just 2.6% of global trade, and only about 17% of African exports are intracontinental, compared to 58% for Asia and 65% for Europe. The African Continental Free Trade Area therefore heralds a new chapter in Africa's integration and development, one of cooperation through trade to drive economic and structural transformation. The African Continental Free Trade Area is the world's largest free trade area, which provides an opportunity for countries in Africa to competitively integrate into the global economy, reduce poverty, and promote inclusion. The potential impacts at the household level are very significant. The third National Development Plan, NDP 3, and Vision 2040 identifies Uganda's strategic opportunities for positioning to harness the African Continental Free Trade Area. These include a youthful population, rapid urbanization, a strong comparative advantage in agriculture and minerals, and 4, a strategic geographical location in the continent, which is ideal to position Uganda as trade and logistics hub. This dialogue is therefore timely, as it provides a platform for a national deliberation on the opportunities the trade agreement presents for Uganda and the roles that each and every one of us here today must embrace to effectively position Uganda as a fast mover in harnessing the enormous transformative potential presented by the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the question is, why is the African Continental Free Trade Area important for Uganda and Africa? First, the African Continental Free Trade Area will significantly reduce poverty. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a force for good, and if properly harnessed, can help lift millions of poverty and bring shared prosperity. The agreement is projected to raise Africans' income by 7%, or by 450 billion, and lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty and 68 million people from moderate poverty by 2035. Wages for both skilled and unskilled workers would also be boosted by 10.3% for unskilled workers and 9.8% for skilled workers. Second, the African Continental Free Trade Area will accelerate growth and make African countries more competitive globally. The African Continental Free Trade Area also offers an opportunity to promote socioeconomic transformation and improve competitiveness through regional value chains in manufacturing. It is estimated that the agreement will increase Africa's exports by 560 billion, mostly in manufacturing. This will significantly boost Africa's industrialization agenda. Intracontinental exports will also increase by 81%, leading to the creation of new industries. diversification of exports, expansion of employment opportunities and incomes, broadening social inclusion, integrating African business into the global economy, and making Africa's private sector more competitive. Allow me to commend the government and the people of Uganda for the foresight to put in place the National Industrialization Policy and Implementation Plan. The policy prepared with the support of UNDP will guide the country's sustainable industrialization agenda for inclusion, employment, and sustainable wealth creation. Third, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity to improve the lives of enterprising women and young people. According to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, women account for around 70% of informal cross-border traders in Africa. Trade tariffs under the AfCFTA will enable informal women and youth traders to operate through formal channels, bringing better protection. Fourth, the AfCFTA will cushion Africa from the negative impacts of COVID-19 and build the continent's resilience to shocks. Small and medium-scale enterprises constitute about 95% of Africa's businesses. In a nutshell, we will see our businesses move forward. I don't think I'm breathing properly with this thing. Is it okay? Because I'm feeling exactly. Sorry. With the African Continental Free Trade Area, the continent is now a single market of 1.3 billion consumers. And therefore, we all see a lot of benefits that are coming from this free trade area agreement. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, development experience also shows that no country has ever achieved rapid economic growth and prosperity without trading with other countries. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area promises a virtuous circle of larger market opportunities, triggering more trade and investment and allowing greater value addition, export diversification, and expansion of the production base of African economies, leading to more and better jobs, social inclusion, transformation, or expansion of local and regional markets. The AfCFTA is therefore an enabler of inclusive growth and sustainable development with a huge potential to positively impact poverty and unemployment, reduce inequality and vulnerability, strengthen the private sector, and enhance economic growth. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Cooperatives is in collaboration with other entities in the executive arm of government, legislature, and judiciary, as well as the private sector, already doing preliminary work to fast-track the national implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. However, a lot more needs to be done. We must work together to overcome the following bottlenecks. First, trade policy and institutional weaknesses and gaps. Uganda will need to strengthen the institutional, human capital, and compliance capacity to implement AfCFTA effectively and benefit fully. Even if Uganda fully implements and complies with AfCFTA agreement, the objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area can only be achieved if a conducive environment and complementary policy measures such as skill training for youth, de-risking, investment funding support, integrated industry, trade, and fiscal policies are put in place to facilitate trade and investment. Secondly, the role of the private sector is also critical for harnessing the opportunities that AfCFTA presents. Many of the investments needed to develop trading policies in Uganda are best undertaken through private-public partnerships to take advantage of the synergy of government and the business sector. African countries must therefore develop effective policies and strategies for exports and identify new opportunities for diversification, industrialization, and value chain development. Furthermore, although the AfCFTA can address many important demand-side constraints to trade, particularly those linked to market size, supply-side constraints must also be addressed. The supply-side constraints that need urgent attention include mobilizing producers for bulking, value addition, and standards certification, amongst others. The other thing I wanted to touch on very quickly is on the special economic zones and industrial parks. Attracting productive investment continues to be an essential one for Uganda's economic growth and job creation. Economic activity continues to be concentrated in low value-added agricultural production, non-tradable services, and manufacturing activities such as construction. All this offer only a limited scope for new employment and market opportunities. Therefore, the development of industrial parks and free zones offer an opportunity for government of Uganda to target resources towards tackling these key challenges in a way that is less financially and politically demanding than wide-scale reforms. Fourth, we need to tackle the challenge of regional transport and logistics. There is need to promote trade facilitation and efficient logistics to support the movement of goods and services between producers and consumers. Efficient border management and clearance processes alongside logistics infrastructure and services will make supply chains more effective and reduce overall trading costs. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, I'm pleased to inform you about a UNDP-supported initiative for Uganda's trade development. This is the SME for Trade initiative, which is supporting today our own readiness for unlocking the potential of AFCTA in Uganda. We have put forward about $2 million, which is catalytic funding intended to support Uganda, intended to support the creation of jobs, and intended to support the third National Development Plan. And I'm glad today that this is not only UNDP, but also this is our UN's own offer to the country. And I'm glad our resident coordinator is here together with other heads of agencies. Through this work, UNDP, together with our sister agencies, particularly those represented here today, FAO, UN Women, IOM, WHO, and others, will support the creation of awareness on AFCTA, will support the government's national strategy. What are we going to trade in? Is it going to be our sugar, our milk, our beans, our vegetables? What is our strategy? And again, we are going to support the ministry in the remaining phases of the negotiations, and I believe colleagues coming after us will talk about that, and again, provide timely information and support through a trade information portal. We are also engaging with the private sector, and I can see my good friend Kuda and others who are here, to establish and pilot a trade finance facility to support small and medium scale enterprises to harness these opportunities. In other words, for you to be able to trade with your counterpart in Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, and others, it doesn't just happen. You should be able to package your product, brand it properly, and be able to market it. So these are things that we are trying to support. Again, support the readiness of women and youth, and I'm glad our colleague from UN Women is here as well, and again, build the capacity of the private sector in different ways. At the UN level, we are also collaborating, and the head of the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office and the UN Commission for Economic Commission for Africa and UN Women and us are also going to be supporting a Women's in Trade protocol, which is also a very important component of the AFCTA. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, as I conclude, African countries have come a long way to agree that the AFCTA is an important one. Our president signed off on them, and on 1st of January, trading started. The time is now to make the AFCTA work and to benefit our populations and Africa as a whole. The successful implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area in Uganda will boost the national socio-economic transformation agenda in Vision 2040. The kind of opportunities presented to African countries by the African Continental Free Trade Area does not happen every day. It doesn't happen every day. Recognizing and seizing this opportunity is an imperative for any African country that means business. The choices Uganda makes today have the potential to shape the country's future in the 21st century. No matter how the global environment may change, African countries need to share their development opportunities with each other and jointly foster an open regional economy and build a community with a shared future for Africans. It is my hope that the outcomes of this dialogue will generate harmony and better coordination for the implementation of the Trade Support Initiative, including identifying strategic partnerships for future engagement in this very important pathway for Uganda's structural transformation and development. I pledge the continuous support of the United Nations Development Program and by extension, our wider United Nations family here in Uganda, led by our resident coordinator, in implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area agenda in an effective and integrated way. I thank you and wish us all very fruitful deliberations. And apologies again, this has not happened to me before. I couldn't just breathe properly, so I needed to take out the mask for the very first time, but thank you.
In the beginning, there was Africa.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Miss Elsie Atafor. And if you can, later as we are probably networking, you just need to pick her mind and find how passionate she is about intra-Africa trade and why we don't need to be looking beyond this continent to trade with Europe or Asia and look inward fast. And with Uganda, the opportunities are immense with the COMESA, SADC, the ESC bloc itself, and beyond. And she'll give you examples of some of the fantastic things being done. People who are exporting some of Uganda's produce and repackaging it and making millions out of our very own products by just repackaging and labeling it. That's a conversation we will need to have. In this room, our chief guest, I see Uganda Export Promotions Board. I see people from the fish industry. I have seen our friends from grain. So you have a broad network of people here. We have representation from the Uganda Manufacturers Association and many more. The women enterprise is also well represented here, and a cross-section of other stakeholders who are joining us for this national dialogue. May I now invite the Minister of State for Trade, the Honorable Harriet Tabazi, to come and make her remarks, and then invite our chief guest, the Honorable David Bahati, to speak to us. You're most welcome, Honorable Minister. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Today's Master of Ceremony, the Minister of State, but representing the guest of honor now, the Honorable Bahati, is our Senior Minister of State, Industry and Cooperative, the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Trade, the team from the UN, all partners who are here under the UN family, our development partners who are here from other sectors, the private sector, which is composed of very many people also, very many teams, team players, export promotion, which is the key player in our products of Uganda, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen in your different capacities, may not mention one by one. You are all most welcome. Today is a very important day, more especially to me as the State Minister for Trade, and one of my jobs being marketing my country, putting my country to another level, lifting it to a level of competitiveness, looking at ways of raising it, networking, collaborating with other countries, fitting within the markets of other areas. I count today as one of the best days in my life for the launch of the African Intercontinental Free Trade Area. When we look at what we have to do as a country, we've had a very elaborate and constructive presentation from the UNDP representative, there is a very big challenge fitting within the parameters that she has set here to compete with other countries which are at that level already, to fit within those markets that are already mentioned. As a country, we have to do a lot, and we cannot do this alone. We have to collaborate and work together. There is nothing that we can fail to do when we work as a team. And I have to thank you and welcome you, therefore, to fully participate with all your efforts, putting the brains together to make sure that Uganda is raised to another level. There are a few things that shape the economy of a country. When we look at a country which is shaped very well, it has to be instrumented. It has to be interconnected. It has to be intelligent. When you put your brains together, work as a team, you will raise the quality of the goods that the other countries need from you. Because one of the things that challenge Uganda is quality. The suffering we had in the European Union market, the suffering we had in other small regional markets, is all about quality. We have to work together, fight the quality of our products in this country. We have the good thing, we have UNBS, which has now started working very, very seriously to make sure anything that leaves this country is checked. Anything that comes into this country is checked. Of course, there are few challenges which we are going to work on. But one of the key is quality and supplying in quantity. You may have the quality, but you don't have the quantities to feed the markets. You are producing with pineapples, for example. When we went to the UAE, they said our pineapple is the most sweetest in the whole world. But do we have the quantities to supply the markets, to satisfy the markets that are there? We need to supply in quantities. Yes, we have the quality, but quantities. But again, we have to supply consistently. You have the quality, you have the quantities, but how is your seasoning? You have made a lot of production this month, then the next 3-4 months, you are out of the market. We need to consistently supply, consistently feed the market with our products. And of course, in doing this, that's why I told you, building a competitiveness economy, you have to do a lot. And we are ready to work with UNDP. We appreciate the support that you have come out to give in areas of improving the packaging, of course. That is one of the challenges, because even if it is an item which is not very nice, but when you package it very well, you know, somebody will look at it and say, this, yes. By the time he opens and does what? He has already bought. Very, very important. So packaging and branding. What have you put on top of your product? That's why sometimes you see people get married. You marry the face. You marry the clothing. You marry the shape of the woman or the man. You don't know what is inside. Marry the brain. What is inside for us now as Uganda matters, but still we need to dress it well. We need to dress it well. So we have a lot we are going to do together, UNDP. We really have the 3 days which we are going to spend here are going to be meaningful to us. And I know my chief guest is going to talk a lot. Never wanted to go into issues a lot, because the gist of the matter that we are looking at as a country is industrializing Uganda. It's boosting it. That's why all our efforts, even all our lobbying outside and wherever, we get investors, bring them to produce what they want us to supply them here in the country. So that we boost. We have the land, we have the incentives, we have the duty frees, the quota frees, many things we can offer. So everybody who is interested in Uganda is really free to come and invest with us and trade with us. We are a very free country that entertains everybody. And in doing it, anyway, you are trading, but you are enjoying the tourism. You are enjoying other things. So there are many incentives that we have as a country that can talk for us, that can market for us as the power of Africa to maintain our name. I'm not going to take a lot of time. My guest is going to go elaborate and deep into our ministry, but I want to thank you so much and really appreciate all the visitors who came from within and outside the country to give us support and to make sure that the objective of the free trade area is achieved. May God bless you. I therefore, without wasting any further time, invite our guest to give the opening of the function and a hand of applause for our guest.
Thank you very much, Honorable Harriet Ntabazi, the Minister of State for Trade, and my colleague, the UN Resident Coordinator, the UNDP Resident Representative, the country representative of FAO, the Chief of Mission, International Organization for Immigration, the country rep, United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Women Empowerment, our Secretary General for the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, good afternoon. First, I want to make some correction. I don't know what Morris meant. Morris said I'm going to be here for 3 days. Morris is a journalist, and you know journalists, it is easier for them to say that a man bites a dog than a dog biting the man. The other day I was having a chat with my friend in the media. There's a time they really bombarded and attacked the NRM party that were not done a lot. So I called a friend of mine in the print media. I said, but of all the achievements were made, isn't there anything good that you can really write about? He said, you know, David, if you want good news, go and read your Bible. On our side, there is no good news. So I want to join my colleagues, the Permanent Secretary and the Minister of State for Trade, to welcome here to this important dialogue. To us, this is a very, very, very important dialogue. It is something that we've been looking for a while, and want to thank the UN. Can clap for you for really supporting us to organize this. The theme, as we have heard for this 3-day engagement, is unlocking Uganda's potential in the African Continental Free Trade Area. Over the 3 afternoons that will be here, our discussion will focus on 3 major areas. We want you, by the time you leave this place, and those of you who are listening through other platforms, to understand what do you mean by African Continental Free Trade Area. What is it? We must really understand that. The second, how do we position Uganda to benefit from this continental free trade area? And then the third is enabling the private sector to benefit from this trade-free area. So those are the 3 objectives that this conversation we are having for the next 3 afternoons that we hope to achieve. And please, if anybody of us goes beyond that, bring them back and say, these are the 3 areas. I want to implore you to be as candid as possible as we discuss each of these 3 sub-themes so that we can generate consensus and momentum on how best the country can harness the opportunities created by the African Continental Free Trade Area. As the UNDP rep told us, and as all of you know, our president signed the agreement, and I think we need to appreciate him because he was one of the few presidents that started signing. Let me thank the resident representative of the United Nations Development Program for your collaboration, and of course the UN family and partnership with the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives in having this important event take place. This event is part of a wider program supported by UNDP, under which we aim at positioning our private sector to benefit from the regional markets under this free trade area. Africa's history was enriched by the launching of its dream of a single market of 54 African countries by the African heads of state and government during the extraordinary summit of 7th July 2019. And I think this dream is a dream that was started by great African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah before our independence, who were supporting this dream of free trade area and having it then and there and then, whereas people like Julius Nyerere wanted incremental implementation of this. So we are happy that we are witnessing what actually was a dream of Kwame Nkrumah, who I think was the president of the country, resident representative of UNDP. Was he? Of Ghana. She comes from Ghana, and today, by the way, you're very smart. And to get that comment from a Muchiga man is not easy. Harriet will tell you what it means. I used to think that attire was only for men. So I'm very impressed today to learn that actually it is for both, and you look very smart in it. You'll appreciate that this was the commencement, rather the beginning of our journey in 2019 when we passed that. And we are very glad that that has happened. The commencement of this grand initiative is one of the pillars towards the realization of the African Agenda 2023. The African we want, which places the destiny of this great continent squarely in the hands of Africans. We must really be proud of this. Remember, recently I think I watched on some of the social media, Professor Sachs was arguing that the African continent, you imagine, that we should be part of the G20, the whole of us, the 54, that we should, he's arguing that we should be one and represent ourselves to be part of the G20. We want Uganda to be part of the G20, not the whole of Africa. Can you imagine where we are? That 50 of us, that's where we have reached. He was making a point, a very kind point, that you allow them, the whole of them at least, to be one and represent themselves at the G20, to become the G21. So we must really get the urgency of how we must move on some of these decisions we have taken. With a population of 1.3 billion people and a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion US dollars, this opportunity offers the continent and Uganda a solid base for speedy industrialization. But to achieve this, there are certain fundamentals we must put in place. This opportunity creates, it's an opportunity to increase agriculture production, industrial development, joint infrastructure development, development of regional value chains. If I may say something about joint infrastructure development. When I was at the Ministry of Finance, I moved a supplementary to support the building of our roads to DRC Congo. DRC, our trade, the trade value between DRC and Uganda is 500 million US dollars, probably the largest, with very difficult terrain of roads. So for us to be able to have even this free trade area, this joint infrastructure development is very, 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 very key. This morning, I met somebody from the Tanzanian Port Authority, and we're discussing about some of the logistics that we need to put in place. For example, we have great depots of iron ore in southern Uganda, worth, I think, 1.9 billion tons. For you to process this into steel, and we're importing steel worth 300 million US dollars, you must have coal. Now coal is in southern part of Tanzania. So the issue is, do you now transport coal towards iron ore, or do you transport iron ore towards coal? So we are looking at having a joint infrastructure where you use railway from Tanga to Mwanza, and then from Mwanza to Port Bell to bring coal here, and maybe look at how you have the railway to the southern Uganda to process iron ore. So joint infrastructure, but this cannot be just made by one country. It has to be a regional infrastructure development. But for Uganda, we have taken leadership by building roads in DRC Congo, because some people are criticizing, how can you build a road in DRC when your own roads you have potholes in your own roads? But you need to trade to be able to generate enough money to build the roads that we are talking about in your own country. So this joint development of infrastructure is very key for us to realize our dream. But to achieve this, there are certain fundamentals, as I said: agriculture production, industrial development, joint infrastructure development, development of regional value chain, regulatory harmonization, and coordinated human resource development, among others. But we must plan to harness these opportunities. And that is the reason that brings us together for these 3 afternoons. You'll appreciate that the above are largely executed by the private sector, with the private sector playing a backup or enabling role. I am therefore, with the public sector, I'm therefore glad to note the involvement of the private sector foundation, who are here. Are you here? Let's appreciate them. I can see Uganda Manufacturers Association, you are here. You can see Daniel, please really appreciate them. The banking sector. The banking sector, are you here? Oh, they are there. Yeah. But we have a quarrel with the interest rate. It will be a discussion for another day, but also talk about it. Talk about it here. The Chamber of Commerce and Industry, you are here, or among others. It is the private sector that will spearhead our efforts to take advantage of opportunities in this trade area. The current challenges in the global trade landscape that are pushing for protectionism, especially by the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, have adversely affected the global economic outlook. According to the IMF World Economic Outlook report of October 2021, the global economy is projected to grow by 5.9% in 2021 and 4.9% in the 2022, 0.1 percent point lower for 2021 than in the July forecast. The downward revision for 2021 reflects a downgrade for advanced economies, in part due to supply disruptions and for low-income developing countries, largely due to worsening pandemic dynamics. African Continental Free Trade Area provides us an opportunity to further consolidate the resilience and should catalyze our recovery from the impact of COVID-19. The free trade area market is timely to the current industrialization drive for our country. These products that we are talking about trade must be of value. We have to add value to these products to be able to have meaningful trade. That's why industrialization is very key. As you may all appreciate, the manufacturing sector is currently dominated by small and medium enterprises that account for over 90% of the enterprises and generates over 80% of the manufactured output. Uganda's manufacturing exports as a percentage of total exports stood at 22.5% in 2018-19 against a 30-year vision target of 50%. If we position ourselves well, the African Free Trade Area will play a great contribution in enabling us to achieve the vision. According to the United Nations Economic Development Report, in Africa, 2019, intra-Africa exports were only 16.6%. And I don't have to repeat this because our sister has already informed us. And this compared 61% for Asia, 67% for Europe. Therefore, for us to benefit from this trade area, we must look at what is it that Africa imports from outside Africa. And I hope our PS or somebody will be able to reflect our import bill item by item, and then be able to have a discussion. How do you trade in these items across the continent? How to trade across the continent? We must also establish the current impediments that we face in getting to the African market. Answering the three questions and addressing the issues around them will get us in the market fully. For this trade area to positively impact Uganda's economic development, key critical success factors for Uganda to focus on will include the following. To develop a free trade area implementation strategy that highlights national development direction in terms of market access enhancement in the wider market. The strategy will entail how to develop and support the private sector to take advantage of opportunities from this market. Addressing issues of taxation, addressing issues of doing business. Some of them have touched on it, for example, electricity. And we have committed ourselves to you, the private sector, that we are going to reduce the tariff to 5%. And we are committed to this, 5 cents. 5 cents only. And the president has directed the Minister of Energy to make sure that this happens in the next 6 months by channeling some of the electricity power directed to the industrial parks and your areas. We must also reduce the cost of transport, the cost of decision making. And we have actually we identified this as a bottleneck at the APRM mechanism, where it was a focal point, where we identified the 13 bottlenecks, 11 proposed by President Yoweri Museveni. And one of the other bottlenecks we talked about was the civil servants' non-responsiveness to making decisions. A decision that needs to be made in one day, in some offices, takes months. And you can't talk about supporting the private sector when you are going to take a month in sitting on those papers when actually you have the chairs. I don't know why people sit on the chair on the papers when they have the chairs. Government has bought you chairs to sit on. Don't sit on people's work. When something comes, know that you must move very fast. Then the issues of corruption. issues of corruption. And fighting corruption is for all of us. You in the private sector, you are the ones sometimes who give bribes to government officials. And government officials, you are the ones who accept bribes from the private sector. So you are all have something to answer in that area. So help us, let's fight, all of us, let's fight that. To create an efficient, conducive trading environment that reduces the cost of doing business. To develop an effective trade facilitation regime. To improve the trade-related quality and standards, as the Honorable Harriet Ntabazi talked about. But also, to be able to really continue talking maybe at the African Union, to urge our brothers and sisters from all these countries to let the guns must go silent if we are going to have trade on the continent. Look at this outlook of Africa now. I was just talking about it with our sister. Ethiopia, the guns are very loud. Which other countries now? Mali? Sudan? New Guinea? How will we trade when the guns are? Because money doesn't need noise. Money hates noise. The guns must go silent for money to really, for people to make money. So we urge the heads of state and governments, really at the African Union, to look at this issue, because the African continent is going back to the period of the 70s and 60s, where coups were the thing of the day, guns. We must put pressure to allow democracy to flourish on the African continent, to let the guns go silent so that people can make money. When people are trading, that's one of the reasons why we must promote this. When people are trading, negotiating deals, they have no time to fight. Because in most cases, what is making people African continent fight? Because power, which sometimes they never touch it, tribes, things that really don't make sense to the ordinary a citizen of the continent. But I think that is at a foreign policy issue. I was just speaking as a citizen who is very interested in the trade on the African continent. I hope everybody agrees that there's no way we are going to do business in South Sudan when the guns are still. There's no way you do farming in Mogadishu when the bombs are going up. That's the reason why you see President William Museveni and the NRM government are committed to ensuring that the security of this country remains solid. And to that, you have our assurance, those of you who want to trade with Uganda. So as I conclude, I want to wish you very fruitful deliberations. I hope the 3 questions are posed will be answered at the end of this conversation. And I want to bring apologies from the Speaker of Parliament, who could not be with us today because of very other state engagement. And I hope that I have read his speech very ably and represented him very well. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our chief guest, who was here actually in a double capacity, representing the Minister of Trade, but also representing our chief guest, the Right Honorable Speaker of Uganda's Parliament. Our host, Elsie, and the ministry. The Honorable Bahati is from Kabale, and he speaks with honesty. You know Bachiga. I know you've probably been to Kabale, Elsie. If the RC hasn't yet gone, Elsie, let's make sure the RC goes to where the real Pearl of Africa is, in Kabale. Okay. When the Bachigas speak, they speak with honesty. So he has posed some questions for us. And later in the session, we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary session with Ben Wine. And then we'll have our panel discussion with Mildred, and a plenary ses we should come to those questions, Honorable Minister, and address them. I am excited that both ministers are speaking to some of the critical issues we've been discussing on quality, so the quality of our products, and some of the projects that we must undertake, like infrastructure, the Honorable Minister has spoken about, in trying to open up our markets to our neighbors as we access those markets, all right? So allow me invite the PS again, as she mentioned. She has a presentation. Let's now dig into the free trade area. We're asking, she's generally looking at what is it about, what is in it, what is in it for Uganda, of course, and where we are in harnessing this free trade area, how far we have come as a country. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Permanent Secretary and Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Ms. Geraldine Sally. So as she comes, please note, she was initially in the private sector, no, actually, well, in government, is a form, but in the corporate sector, now she's in government. So you'll notice that government is changing the way they do their things, even in the presentation itself. So welcome the PS.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maurice. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. You might get tired of seeing me, but please hang in there. We have a long journey, as you can see, and I'm really happy to be part of this journey. You'll kindly allow me to remove my mask since I'm at a safe distance from all of you. I also want to catch my breath. What? Oh, for the presentation. Wonderful. Thank you. So I spared you the long welcoming remarks because I knew you had a bigger dose of me later on today and tomorrow and the day after. So I'll start by just giving you a small overview. Maurice has taken me through the technology, which normally fails, but thank God this one is working. My Honorable Minister, who is just presented, has hinted on some of the figures. Thank you so much. So when someone gives you a head start, it's a very good way to start. But he's also said he'll be leaving at some point. He's also got a very busy schedule. So when you see him moving, you just know that you have been forewarned. But he's fully with us in this journey, and he has the commitment to support this agenda. First, I will start by the structure of what I'm going to discuss today. So the timelines that have been there, I was actually very surprised when I started reading about this AFCFTA. It's a mouthful. And Elsie said to me, you know what, just go CFTA. That's how I also do it, you know. And we just move. So, but basically what it is, we're an African market with one boundary, one people. And that's how I see it. So I'll talk about the scope of this very African, this CFTA. I'll talk about the negotiations so far that have happened, the institutions, the interests, and the structures so far that are designing the scope of this CFTA. The identification of where Uganda's potential lies within this, what is in this for us. Elsie talked about unlocking the potential in our value chains, the potential in our markets, the potential in the whole azure of investments within this structure. And so you can imagine now, in January 2012, 18th, ordinary sessions of the Assembly started. So these are heads of state and prime ministers actually sitting down and deciding that, you know, this is a decision we need to take to boost the intra-African trade. This is a decision we need to take for ourselves as our country. In fact, I'm so glad, Honorable Bahati, that you talked about this G20 and the G21. Can you imagine when we are all being boxed in? And sometimes it sort of hurts when people say, oh, Africa, this country, Africa, where is it? You know, so we are regarded as just one country, but it's okay. For us, it's okay. And if we actually become big like this, we can actually consume our own market. There's a time I was told someone got a tender to supply ducks to the Sheraton. And if anybody from Sheraton is here, they would attest to it. This person got a tender to supply ducks at the Sheraton. This man only managed to supply for 3 months because there were no mass production of ducks in Uganda or in East Africa. So what he did, he first got all the ducks that when he got the tender, he started rearing the ducks. Then he managed to supply for the first month within his farm. Then the second farm, he started traveling the country, asking whoever has ducks. In the third country, he went to Kenya, Tanzania, and he found himself in the region looking for ducks. And in the end, he had to concede to Sheraton and say, I am unable to supply you ducks for a whole year. But the demand was there. And the prices, and more they became scarce, the higher the prices. Right there was a gap for the supply of ducks in Uganda. We have communities now that are actually consuming food which is beyond our traditional meals. Okay? If you hear the people in Hoima, I've always talked about it, those people doing the oil wells, they are actually eating rabbit meat. Traditionally in Uganda, that is like a small pet. I don't know, because me personally, I have never eaten rabbit. But that is the kind of meat they eat. It's delicate, it's healthy, and we do not have a steady supply of rabbit meat. So these people are actually encouraging people to do rabbits. But we cannot even supply our own demand just before you even go to CFTA. So for me, this decision was critical because it was a recognition of the fact that we have demand and supply which we can contain ourselves. We don't really need G20. G20 needs us. Because that is I want us to believe that we first of all, we give you all the minerals in the world. That's why everybody came to Africa. Congo. Congo has got all the, it is one of the countries with all the minerals in the world. God just sat there and put everything mineral in Congo. So when they tell us, oh yes, now we are going to come and trade with you. Yes, you come and trade with us, but just to know that we are not just G20, G21. We are Africa, and we can actually boost our own markets ourselves. Just allow us to do that first. So this is what we call the free trade area. Let free trade mean free trade. So negotiations started January 2012. So we moved on to negotiations to establish the African Continental Free Trade Area, June 2015. So these negotiations were now trying to regularize and implement the decision that was made by our heads of states and our prime ministers who were present from those countries. So after that, the 10 negotiating rounds happened, starting from March 2018. You can imagine this has been a long journey. For some of us who are just coming in, I kept wondering like how all these are actually happening, and who's participating, who's talking for us, who's representing us. I would really like to know, who is actually in those active conversations on our behalf, and we engage them. So after that, negotiating rounds, 44 of the 55 African Union members and the member states signed up the agreement. So that is where also our president also signed in. And all these protocols are covering goods and services. They're covering trade in services. They're covering dispute resolutions, anything to do with facilitation, anything to do with quality, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and rules of origin. Take note of that rules of origin, because this is something that very many people get confused about. But really, some of the things in the agreement state that most of these productions of goods and services have got to be within the continent of Africa to a certain extent. Say maybe 40% of a product or 70%, it's all agreed. Say if it is maize. If you're going to be purifying and processing maize, at least let let the maize itself be from Uganda. The chemicals that are treating it, the chemicals and the machines that you're using to process it and everything could come from abroad, but fundamentally the maize will have a certificate of origin from Uganda. So you know that you're actually buying a product from Uganda. And you know we are promoting our Buy Uganda, Build Uganda. So even if it's a phone, you know, we started making phones. This thing called Simi. It was very interesting. Yes, some of these products that are making this phone are actually coming from Congo. And some of them are coming from China. But at least we know that 80% of that makeup of that phone is actually coming from Africa. So that is exactly what it means, that that product will have a code which represents its origin coming from Africa. And most of you who are in trade really know what I'm talking about when you say the code of the product is from Africa. But it becomes very difficult when we are talking about agricultural produce and agricultural products, because then how do you see that the fish is actually from the lake here and not from some lake in Canada or wherever? So it is very hard to actually manage some of this, but we have to make that effort, and a joint effort on our borders is critical. So the timelines in these negotiations, the Cabinet of Uganda on the 19th of March 2018 made the decision that Uganda signs the CFTA. So now the Ministers of Foreign Affairs subsequently on the 21st of March 2018, during that 10th Extraordinary Summit in Africa, signed on for Uganda. And that one was also activated. And then on the 20th of November, despite all the, they deposited that, whatever we signed in our depository as an instrument of ratification for that CFTA with our African Union Commission. So that record is actually there in, is that me? I'm sorry about that. No, my whatever is not working anymore. Is it? Because I'm pressing the button and it's not moving. Oh, okay, now it's working. So the key timelines in the CFTA negotiations, we had, if it hadn't been for COVID, I think we would have moved. But I think COVID gave us a real test in our business continuities, in our test of resilience. You know, everything happens for a reason. COVID might have come, but it actually made us see where people are relevant. When it talked about food, Africa, we were self-contained. There was food, actually. So other people were like, my God, if Africa closes their borders, where is this food going to come from? Of course, we had the Brazilian markets and other markets from elsewhere, but it made us realize that, you know, the essentials of life to survive, where do these markets come from? Because food had to move for people to stay alive. Essentials like medicine had to move. Everything else was a luxury. So we knew our essentials now. And it also showed the gaps where we actually need to supply. So much as COVID came, and it put off the delay in implementation, but it made us see where exactly our gaps were. So we also have scope of this CFTA agreement. So once it was established, we had to do the protocols on all goods and services. We had to do the protocols on settlement of procedures. Annexes were done. You know, all this is the technical work that had to be put into this agreement. Most of these things are happening. But I'm also wondering whether there is an active forum for us as Ugandans, Miss Elsie, where we can continuously engage the CFTA and the African Union continuously, even if we are not members of the Union, but where we can actually feed our thoughts actively. Because what I get from my office is people continuously contact me on different areas of trade. For example, this week I had a young chap coming in from they call themselves an Association of Shoemakers of Uganda. They've created an association because they believe that they're powerful in numbers and that they can command some space and some protection in terms of bubu. And you'll see later on that every country is allowed at least a maximum of 3% to protect their home industries. Now, their argument was that there's so many shoes from China. And then for them, they're actually using actual leather from our own local industry, which is really strong. And they feel that their cost of production is high because their leather is genuine, they have to treat it, they have to ship in equipment from China and elsewhere in the world. So their shoe is a very authentic shoe, long-lasting, even your grandchild can wear it. However, it doesn't have market, and it's not protected. So when the Chinese come in and flood the market, someone is actually going to take the Chinese shoe over theirs. So we were thinking, how do we open our boundaries, but yet again protect those small cottage industries and, continuously have that conversation and keep refining all this. Well, I guess if we have a forum where we can continuously have these conversations for our SMEs, remember we are called the least developed countries classification in World Trade Organization. So if we are quite a number of small countries, but we are big in numbers, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity where Africa can become big even when we have the small SMEs in volumes. So this is a conversation that I really, really want, in fact, with the help of the small scale industries in Uganda. They have their own association, but we can actually empower them with the knowledge and a direct conduit to the decision makers, live, without having to sort of go through channels. So if with the technology we have, I'm sure we can actually foster something which is live. I don't know. Food for thought. So timelines, trade in goods. So we have the tariff liberalization. This was a very complicated subject because we have got about 5,500 lines of trade within just the COMESA area. Lines of trade means that these are products, and mainly we are very big on products, less on services. So people are not necessarily taking services across boundaries because, a service is provided usually by people. But so for example, if I'm providing consultancy services, if I board a plane, you will not necessarily know that I'm actually going to do a consultation. However, if I'm taking coffee, you will know that this is a packet of coffee. So we have to also go into that area of liberalization, not only for goods and services, so not only for goods, but also for services. This week, the people of events management also launched their association. I was privileged to be part of that launch and be their guest of honor. But what I noticed was, we are actually, just like the pineapples, we have the sweetest pineapples. We actually have the best events managers within the East African region and COMESA region. We have people who come from Sudan. They get people to actually do events management, decorating, you name it, into other countries. And they now have to contend with the barriers of trade in terms of providing these services. So sometimes people are actually shipping some of their things to Sudan or Congo or Kenya, and then they're met with surprises. So we also need to cover services much as we are doing all these products. So this classification, or the tariff liberalization envisaged, which is the 90%. So the sensitivities are such that if we have been taxing, say, 25%, we say, okay, Egypt has milk, we don't have milk, we have milk, Egypt is buying milk from Norway. Why would Egypt buy milk from Norway when Uganda has all this milk? Egypt should be buying, it's cheaper to actually buy from Uganda because we are on the same continent. You will cut costs, you'll have the quality milk, organic, and you'll have it in time on a daily because this milk corridor of Africa is huge here in Uganda. So we are saying that why don't we have more of this liberalization of tariffs than not? And this is something that technical teams are going to be working on. This is where the journey is. If you look at this slide, this is where the biggest journey is. This is where the negotiations are going to happen, where most of the products within Africa, people are going to sit, look at their gaps, and then decide what is going to be good for them, for each of the countries, and what they can negotiate on. On the 7% of the tariff lines that will be sensitive, these will be for the smaller countries. So the 13 years will be for the least developed countries. It will take 13 years to actually make them more sensitive. And then for the countries which are the developing countries, but also less sensitive, it will take even less. So once I talked about the 3%, I'm not going to mention it again in the interest of time, but based on the East African Common External Tariff, that represents about 175 tariff lines. So maybe that's where our small shoe producers can fall. We can protect them for the interest of the bubu. That is the bubu space, the 3% that we have for Uganda. And that is cutting across all African countries, where on average it is estimated that they would have 175 product lines to start. But again, think about services as well. So these are the sectors, the common sectors that we think we can look in services, business, communication, financial, the financial services, the consultants, all those gurus in capital services, transport, and tourism. So Uganda has negotiated under the East African Community positions that first developed through the consultative process. Partner states are also negotiating within East Africa. The cabinet, through our Ministry of Trade, we oversee those negotiations as well. I have Mr. Walakira there. Please stand up for people to see you. He's one of our lead people, alongside with Mr. Mutahunga, who actually go in to do some of these negotiations. So please look for them. In case you need anything to be negotiated on our behalf, those are the people that I know at first, at least within my area. And then cabinet subcommittee membership, ministers, we have all the other entities of government. We have agriculture, we have foreign affairs, tourism, Ministry of Energy, the presidency, especially on the lines of security. Then we have the East African Affairs and Attorney General's chambers. All these people are involved in these discussions. And there's also a wider community of private sector and all those other people. But the only thing is that private sector may not necessarily be in cabinet, but they are represented as well somehow. So the cabinet subsection interacts with the private sector at a technical level. Yeah, so our technical people, that's where they come in to help private sector. So the key interests in our negotiations, this is where now also one of the main issues. So we expand the country's exports for goods and services. And then we do the joint infrastructure. Now those are the roads that Honorable Bahati was talking about. Joint infrastructure, it means that we can actually share. We're already exporting electricity to Kenya. They buy. We already are doing roads for Congo. So all these infrastructures which are joint are actually helping within the region. So I hope that more African countries can do a lot more on the joint infrastructures. So I would like to close here. So market access. All these EU countries, where does our potential lie? And once we do examine the market gap is what I have actually discussed. How much does Uganda supply of what is in Africa? But I think I have missed my slides on the money. I don't know whether I moved so fast, but quite frankly, I think in the interest of time, we had something to do with seeing the lines. I think when I pressed the other time, I missed most of my slides, but they were to do with, I will not go there. But let's just say that we have got deficits in some of the areas like milk. We have got deficits in the supply of tea, coffee on this very continent. And we would like to supply more, and everything that Uganda is supplying is less than 2% of what is demanded in Africa. That is the most important thing. We are supplying cotton, we are supplying coffee, we are supplying tea, we are supplying everything that we produce for from our agriculture sector. We are actually only satisfying 2% or less than 2% of the market within Africa alone, which means that we have got a lot of potential to unlock as Uganda alone. So, and all this can actually be unlocked. Well, there is the slide, finally, but you can see the numbers. This is a slide that is showing you the rest of Africa, what Uganda is supplying to the rest of Africa. As small as it is, and you can see what we are now supplying Europe. The biggest chunk is actually going to the Middle East. And that's why people of Dubai were very happy with us. So Uganda is taking more to the Middle East, taking more to the Comesa area, the region, taking more to European Union. And the rest of the European people who actually, we are not part of their G20. You see what I mean? And then, lastly, we are even taking to Tanzania. So that means that what we are taking, 70.83, which is in the latest year, 2021, it means that we are taking very little to the rest of the world, sorry, to the rest of Africa. So there is potential within CFTA. And that is the same with the figures. Those figures that you saw in the previous page, that is the percentage. And that's why I was saying we are actually taking less than 2% on average to the rest of Africa. Yet we have the other 98% we can actually take within Africa. We don't have to export it off our continent. So that is the biggest conversation we are having, and that is what those figures are representing. We have potential to upscale on the dairy products, where we are only taking 2%, 1.7%. And then on maize, we are taking 3.2%, and that's the highest percentage. On sugar, those people of sugar, Kakira sugar, please pay attention. All that you're producing is only 1.7% to the rest of Africa. We can actually do more. There is headroom. And then fruits and vegetables, which we love, watermelon, nanasi, butunda, is only 1% in Africa. And yet we produce like the freshest fruits on this continent. Soya beans, 0.4%. We are on zero, you know? Then plastics, which is really a byproduct of our oil and gas from Hoima, we are only exporting 0.1% to the rest of Africa. Yes, we have that headroom of 99.0%. So the potential is there in most of these products. And I've just picked just about 5 products to show you and demonstrate to you that we actually have potential to do more within Africa. And I have not even started on services at all. So the more we formalize our structures in the service industry, the more we are able to export more to the other parts of Africa. So I leave this at that. Why does Africa import these products from outside Africa? Why? Why are we importing from Africa? And why does Uganda export these products to Africa despite the production lines living here in Uganda? In the interest of time, I'll leave it here. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. But in the next, and please bring as much information to us as possible. We are here to learn together, grow together, and implement together. So the more information we have as your technical team, the better. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen.
Another round of applause for our PS. Thank you very much. You know, I had to be very careful because the PS is also a co-convener. So while I was alerting her about time, I was careful to make sure I am also back here tomorrow. So I needed to be very careful. Our chief guest, you are aware that when you're talking about our trade with DRC, I had recently asked about some numbers on DRC. And so when I asked, because our milk is going, our eggs, and all these agricultural produce, and I asked, so what are we importing? There were 2 items I noticed that were coming from there. It was kitenge, cloth, and can you guess the second item? Yeah? Which one? No, you guys are going for the small things. There was cosmetics. I'm sure you know which cosmetics were coming out of the DRC. But those were actually also imported. Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. So I want to move quickly to our next presentation. I need to mention that Dr. Joy Kategekwa is online, the Regional Strategic Advisor. Since Elsie said we say CFTA, I think that is safer. For CFTA, we'll be joining the panel discussion with Birunji and Isaac. So I just wanted to let her know we'll come to you very shortly. But first, to the Secretary General of CFTA Secretariat, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, who will be speaking to moving towards operationalization of the CFTA. Let's run that video, please.
Thank you for inviting me to participate in this very important dialogue, unlocking Uganda's potential in the AFCFTA. Right Honorable Jacob Olanya, Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda, Honorable Francis Mwebesa, Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Honorable Ministers of State, Honorable Members of Parliament, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, the resident representative of the UNDP, Members of Parliament, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to join you today for this very important dialogue. Let me thank the organizers of the event for extending an invitation to me and commend them for focusing the discussions on the AFCFTA, which is at a very critical stage of early implementation. I was asked to speak on the topic moving towards operationalization of the AFCFTA, and I take the opportunity to do so, and I'm very delighted to be granted the opportunity to do precisely that. To date, there are 54 countries who have signed the agreement establishing the AFCFTA. Only one country in Africa has not signed the agreement establishing the AFCFTA. State parties who have ratified the agreement establishing the AFCFTA as of today stand at 41. This is a very important milestone in Africa's economic integration. It means that these 41 countries who have ratified the AFCFTA have accepted the legal obligations to open their markets, to reduce barriers to intra-Africa trade, reduce barriers to intra-Africa investment, and to adhere to a single set of rules for trade and investment in Africa. As you may be aware, ladies and gentlemen, the AFCFTA is being negotiated and implemented in phases. Phase 1, of which we're almost at the conclusion, covers trade liberalization of goods and services and establishes a mechanism for the settlement of disputes concerning members' rights and obligations under the agreement. Under the liberalization of trade in goods, state parties have committed to eliminate import duties on 97% of goods traded on the continent over a phased period, as well as address non-tariff barriers, which are a major obstacle to trade in Africa. The remaining 3% of tariff lines, which account for up to 10% of intra-Africa trade, are the so-called excluded products, which will not be subject to tariff reduction. This is to enable and allow for flexibilities for state parties who have particular sensitivities and who require the time to adjust over a 5-year period to adjust to the new tariff regime. Since the AFCFTA is a negotiated rules-based system, to establish the rule of law, and in particular the rule of trade law, the practical implementation of the agreement therefore does not immediately become possible on ratification. Rules of origin, tariff schedules, and services sector commitments will still have to be negotiated. It is only after the negotiations have been concluded and subsequently approved by the Assembly of Heads of States and Government that the way will be paved for implementation. The negotiation on the rules of origin is aimed to build sufficient consensus on what the minimum level of value addition should be in Africa, since many products will not be 100% locally made. Thus, the goal is to set the rules for each product, stipulating the level of local content that must be produced or value addition that must be undertaken in one or more African countries. The objective of this exercise is to ensure that we foster industrialization in Africa and that we limit the importation of trade-distorting products from third countries from outside of the AFCFTA market. Currently, this negotiation has resulted on rules of origin, has resulted in 87.03% agreement on product lines, marking substantial progress that has been made over the last 4.5 years. With respect to trade and services, 5 priority sectors in the services sector for the first round have been identified for immediate liberalization. And these are tourism, transport, communication, financial services, and business services. However, state parties, where they so wish, may choose to liberalize more sectors than have already been identified based on the principles of variable geometry and reciprocity. Liberalization under the AFCFTA is being implemented through already existing customs unions such as the East Africa Community, Southern African Customs Union, CIMAC, and ECOWAS. Each of these customs unions is required to prepare its tariff offers, rules of origin, and schedules of commitments in trade in goods and services for submission to the AFCFTA Secretariat for verification. The activation and operationalization of the dispute settlement body, which happened on the 26th of April 2021 in Accra, Ghana, marks a significant milestone as Africa marches towards an integrated market on the basis of a multilateral trading system. The dispute settlement body is composed of representatives of all state parties and monitors and evaluates the functions of the dispute settlement mechanism. The inauguration of the dispute settlement body in April 2021 therefore signaled Africa's willingness, the willingness of state parties to abide by the rules of the dispute settlement protocol, particularly in relation to the settlement of trade, investment, related disputes that may arise under the AFCFTA. This signals Africa's willingness to abide by a rules-based system and to ensure that we submit ourselves to the rule of trade law as we negotiated it under the protocol on dispute settlement. The non-tariff barriers resolution mechanism is operational. It is a critical tool to ensuring that all non-tariff barriers are removed and eliminated, subject to a negotiating process between the complainant and the country that is alleged to have a non-tariff barrier in place. We believe that the non-tariff barriers resolution mechanism will be an important tool for economic operators to access new markets across the African continent. With the implementation of Phase 1 in January this year, the benefits of economic integration from trade creation among African member states, and B, from trade diversion from other countries outside of the AfCFTA market towards the enlarged continental trade area will be enhanced as the member states increase their production capacities, driven by a higher level of investment and productive capacity. Thus, as the AfCFTA gains traction, it will improve intra-Africa trade and competitiveness and give Africa a greater share of global trade. Ladies and gentlemen, in phase 2 of the AfCFTA negotiations, we shall develop protocols on intellectual property rights, investment, competition policy, digital trade, and women and youth in trade. In this regard, preliminary work has already commenced, and we look forward to providing a report to the Council of Ministers responsible for trade. Regarding outstanding ratifications, the Secretariat continues to engage the countries that have not yet ratified to do so as a matter of urgency, of course, subject to their domestic legal requirements. We do, however, recognize that the issue of ratification is a sensitive matter that is domestic, legal, and political in nature. We are also promoting an AfCFTA private sector strategy. And in terms of this private sector strategy, we have identified high potential for import substitution continental value chains, considering products both produced and consumed in Africa. In other words, we have identified value chains that we should be focusing on to improve import substitution and to ensure that we develop Africa's capacity in producing for ourselves, particularly in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. The types of value chains that we shall identify are those value chains that will have a significant impact, a positive impact, on boosting intra-Africa trade and accelerating Africa's industrial development. In the area of inclusion for small medium enterprises, we have developed an AfCFTA digital application which will enable the connectivity of small medium enterprises across the African continent. This AfCFTA digital app shall have all information that is required for a small medium enterprise to be able to expand the market into new markets. For example, this digital app shall have market information, due diligence information, and it shall have what we call the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. The Pan-African Payments and Settlement System is designed to ensure that we overcome the challenge of currency convertibility. Currently, we have 41 currencies on the African continent. 41 currencies on the African continent that contribute to a cost of over 5 billion United States dollars, the cost of converting these currencies in order for us to be able to trade amongst one another in Africa. The cost of currency convertibility is a significant constraint to boosting intra-Africa trade, to making trade in Africa efficient and affordable. Through the partnership that we have with Afreximbank, this Pan-African Payments and Settlement System will enable more efficient and cost-effective trade to take place in Africa. You will now be able to trade from East Africa with a counterparty in West Africa using your local currency without having to convert to the dollar or any other third currency. We believe that this will significantly reduce the cost of trade in Africa. Let me conclude by saying we recognize that implementation of the AfCFTA will be difficult and it will have challenges. We also know from experiences of other regions that implementing a trade agreement and ensuring regional and market integration is a long process. It has taken the European Union over 72 years to reach the depth of market integration that the EU enjoys today. However, even with the challenges, it cannot be argued that the road and the journey that we are undertaking is not worth it. I therefore implore the private sector on the African continent to take full advantage of the AfCFTA and the new markets that the AfCFTA shall open throughout the African continent. I wish all of you very, very good deliberations. And once again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Wamkele Mene, who is the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. All right, so we are now going to transition into a panel discussion, but I'm also aware that there might be people who are now just joining us. If you're joining us on UBC and NBS, and also joining us via the online platforms of those media organizations, and those of you joining us via Zoom, I want to again welcome you to this national dialogue on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area under the theme Unlocking Uganda's Potential in the CFTA. Let me quickly invite Mildred Tuhaise, my colleague from NBS, to come. She will be managing our panel this afternoon. And she will, of course, begin her conversation by introducing her panelists. Two of them are here, the other is online. And then she will start off with Dr. Joy Kategekwa, who is on standby, so that we can then transition back into the room to the ones who are here. And then a Q&A session, which of course has been shortened to manage the time. And then we must conclude at exactly 5 p.m. because of TV time. TV time is not elastic. So over to you, Mildred.
Hello. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Morris, for inviting me. And like Morris did say, we have TV time. We just have about an hour. We'll have to do a panel, but we'll also have to be taking into consideration our a plenary session, because it's not just the panelists, it's not the discussion, but it's about deeply understanding the African Continental Free Trade Area. It was exciting when the Secretary General was speaking about having to use the same currency, an East African currency, to trade with a West African person, because that's one of the bottlenecks that has been paid attention to. 41 currencies, how do we deal with that? And we know that some currencies, depending on the economic strength of countries, are weaker than the others. And I think this is the time the African Continental Free Trade Area brings to us the realization of working together. We're 55 African countries, but at totally different levels. And out of those, over 30 of those African countries are considered to be low-developed countries. And we know all the other, disadvantages that comes with being in that particular zone. So without any further ado, like Morris Mugisha did say, online we will be having Dr. Joy Kategekwa, who is the Regional Strategic Advisor of the CFTA and UNDP Regional Bureau Africa, who will be joining us online in just a short while. I will also be having on the floor Dr. Isaac Shinyenkwa, who is a Senior Research Fellow, Head of Trade and Regional Integration Department, Economic Policy Research Center. Dr. Isaac, I kindly request that you take your seat to the fore. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give him a round of applause. And also, I will have Mr. Daniel Birungi, who is the Executive Director of Uganda Manufacturers Association. A round of applause for him. And I totally believe that we are going to be well socially distanced. And ladies and gentlemen, today, as earlier on mentioned by Minister Honorable Bahati, and also mentioned by the UNDP rep, we are focusing on contextualizing this. Well, probably some people have heard about it or listened to it on TV or in particular discussions, but haven't gotten to grasp what exactly it is about. What does it entail? What are some of the articles right in there? How does it work for Uganda? Now, tomorrow is when we will be focusing on positioning Uganda as a country to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And then on the last, looking at enabling the private sector to take up these opportunities. But also what's pretty interesting, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that the African Continental Free Trade Area is focusing, has a specific focus to the women and youth, who actually make a bigger workforce in every aspect that we are talking about, and also quite a bigger percentage across many African countries. So allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to start off with Dr. Joy Kategekwa, who is joining us online to briefly break this down for us. It's a huge document. Some African countries have already ratified this, over 40 of those. Some haven't yet ratified because they need to look at the domestication of this agreement into their countries. But briefly break it down for us, Dr. Joy, in a few minutes before we can continue.
Indeed, and good morning from New York. It's a pleasure to engage in this fascinating conversation. I'm so proudly Ugandan, and I'm happy that we're having this discussion. Breaking it down is not complicated. You know, we trade lawyers like to talk about tariffs and regulations as if it were made in heaven. But indeed, it's really just a simple way to say, how can we defeat poverty? How can we ensure that the efforts of those Ugandans that are getting out there, creating products, creating services, have a market outside of this continent and can therefore create the ripple effect of the development perspective? In terms of simplifying the African Continental Free Trade Area, I'd like to talk about two things: scope and scale. And if you allow me, if it's possible, I'd like to share my screen so we can get a sense. You know, when we talk about scale, Uganda has been engaged in various trade agreements. It's not the first one. We're members of the WTO. We're also members of the East African Community. But I think what is truly at stake in this context is the question of scale, looking beyond ESC. When you think about it, the Secretary General has told us, the PS has also told us, we're looking at a huge number of countries that have ratified. 42 have ratified the agreement. You know, 39 have deposited their instruments, basically saying we shall move our domestic regime to give the AfCFTA market reality in terms of the regime in which we will treat foreign products. These goods, these schedules have been verified. You know, we've talked about the sequencing, so I will not repeat all of that. In a simple way, what I'd say is, as we say in Luganda, JHD, because before we used to talk about the AfCFTA as a policy question, a political question, you know, but now we see that it is practically there. That, you know, out of the 55, 42 have said, this is going to be our new regime in our country. We will treat Ugandan products, goods and services in a preferential manner because it has ratified the agreement. When we say JHD, what do we mean practically? We're talking about value chains, because value chains are the entry point, are the participatory point, are the democratization process of this agreement called the AfCFTA. Now, when you think about it, at UNDP, we've done some research together with the AfCFTA Secretariat, and at least 10 value chains come through. And I'd like to go through them because they get an understanding, if you compare them vis-a-vis Uganda's export structure, of what is truly at stake. Now, why these value chains are important is because when we finish the agreement and the political legal questions, what have countries exchanged between and amongst each other to concretely say, of the 40 countries, this is what we're giving practically. We've identified 10 value chains: automotives, leather and leather products, cocoa, soya beans, textiles, clothing and apparel, pharmaceuticals, vaccine manufacturing, mobile financial services, cultural services. And the 10th is all the converging services that the Secretary General also spoke about. And therefore, when you think about this chart, I think it's very interesting, because if you're a trade policy professional, you're saying, how do I help my people to enter the soybean industry? I think that the PS talked about the fact that we're exporting 0.4% of soya. This is the chain of what's truly available in that line. So how do we enter different parts of that? This is the sort of information that will be critical to understand how to harness the opportunity. So again, emphasizing that the point is really and truly about value chains, how it is that we use the raw materials, create production bases, get into larger markets, which is the AFCFTA, and look at it also from the future-proofing perspective, because the PS was right when she said, COVID has taught us lessons, so we have to think about resilience. Now, when we think about, and I'll stop at this point just not to monopolize the conversation, the AFCFTA is truly about how much, two things, how much the exporters that are hustling, producing, exporting this 2% that the PS spoke about, but also about how it is that government and the policymakers can take on almost a commitment to say, we shall connive, we shall conspire, we shall intentionally ensure that we facilitate you to export goods in the AFCFTA. Before, we've spoken about trade facilitation as improving the situation of what happens at the border. And I'd like for us to think about the fact that it is not what happens at the border. It is facilitating the enabling environments that I must go through before I get to the border. Our recent research at UNDP confirms that if governments take on an obligation to do within an 18-month period an agenda that streamlines, that processes, that accelerates, that smoothens trade facilitation, we can get huge gains for the continent, some of which include an 18% uplift of the sectors in which women are, a saving of about 17 billion in terms of costs related to documentation, border movements, etc., but also $27 billion in terms of additional aid. And finally, the big number, $500 billion that are going to be got by Africa's exporters if governments connive to root for them. Let me stop there for now, and then I can engage in the conversation ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. But I know, Joy, that you will be leaving pretty quick, and probably just before you leave again. After breaking down the entire agreement for us, let's now zero it down to a country like Uganda, an East African country that is considered to be in the LDC range. And it is a country that is looking forward to move, at least to the middle income status, which we had been promised some few years back until some issues happened, including COVID. Where does Uganda fall? How does Uganda get to penetrate through such a huge market of 1.3 billion people?
So, I think that it comes down to maybe three things. One is know the opportunity. When I was at LDC many years ago, we had a professor, when she'd come into the class, she'd say, know the law, and we'd all answer, know the law, know the law. The ones who were in my batch would know, we used to laugh about that. Know the AFCFTA, know the AFCFTA, know the opportunities in there, because you cannot use what you don't know. So that's the first thing. And I think important work has been done on that, because the PS gave us an indication already of a zoning and understanding. So we must identify the niche and identify it early. That's one thing. The second thing is, what do we mean by trade capacity building? I've worked in this area for 19 years, and I think in a sense we've mastered the art of creating opportunities. So we have some at the WTO, we have some in the ESE. We need to master the art of transforming that knowledge, that energy, that practice into increasing exports. And so what is a new generation trade capacity building agenda? Uganda will benefit from the AFCFTA if the policy officials talk to the private sector, understand where they are. And that's why I use the words connive, intentionally, move, root for removing those barriers. When we talk about standards, all of us, the trade lawyers, the trade professionals know what these things mean, standards, SPS, TBT. But I think what we need to do is take that down into, how do we get our exporters to meet the standards in the Senegalese market? How do we get our exporters to move their goods and showcase them in intra-African trade fairs. We were just in Ghana recently with Elsie, the resident representative. She did a fantastic job. She picked a group of Ugandan manufacturers, took them to Ghana to showcase their products. I was so proud to see these Ugandans manufacturing shoes and clothing and all these sorts of things, quality products that we can wear. You will not use the market if you cannot produce to the quality and the standards that are required in external markets. And so it goes down really to that point of a capacity building agenda on trade must go beyond the policy frameworks. It must touch the practical realities of the problems exporters face and then use the government machinery to create that space. Final. What is the infrastructure for trade? It is not the agreement. It is not the policies only. It is the energy. It is the transport. It is the finance. How do we unlock that potential? Now I work in the United States with UNDP at headquarters, and I get to see a little bit how the US supports its enterprises to ensure that they export. There's nothing about the market creating the magic. There's everything about the government working with the market to make sure that they succeed. And so how do you give them information? How do you take them and showcase them? How do you ensure that they're financing tools and instruments that can allow them to be competitive? How do you touch on that specific question around the specificities of what women face? And then use yourselves as the unlockers, the bottle openers, the freers of the space to ensure that the goods can indeed be produced at scale and go create a good impression and then sustain in terms of production. Thank you very much.
All right, another round of applause for Dr. Joy Kategekwa. Thank you so much. I know you'll be running away probably pretty soon, but if we can still be with you, that will be very, very beautiful. I think Dr. Joy spoke about one key aspect is knowing the opportunity, but knowing the CFTA itself. But allow me invite back Dr. Daniel Birungi to the fore for our panel, as well as Dr. Isaac Shinyenkwa with us right there. Joy said one thing, and she said it in the Luganda dialect, Jechiri, meaning that this is actually existent. If you still think that it won't work, you probably need to sit down and think about the over, 35.4 billion import bill of Africa. The money is that we keep sending away from Africa. This is money that should have developed our economies. This is money that should have developed the services. We keep complaining about a lot of services, education, talk about health. Think about that if you still think that this agreement will not be able to work for Africa. And in that case, I would like to invite Dr. Isaac Shinyenkwa. Looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area and many others that Uganda has been a part of, what's the difference with this? What sort of new touch does it bring for Uganda's context?
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you hear me well. Okay. What's different with the FCTA compared to what we have had in the past? But before I go into that, I just want to make mention of unpacking what this is for us in a form of a triangle, where you see on one side is the private sector, on the other side there is the government, and on the other side is the FCTA and the markets and the other countries. If this triangle works well, then we are likely to benefit a lot, quite a lot from the FCTA compared to perhaps other engagements we have got involved in. What's different about this? Of course, it has been said that we have new markets, a broader, bigger market. I was looking at statistics today, and Uganda as a country, we export about 17% of all our exports to the African continent. So you can imagine we can move more than that, extend a little bit. Even if we just hit a mark of 30% or even 40%, that will be quite a lot. That's something new on board. Of course, it will help us with our very many SMEs that are struggling quite a lot. You know very well that they contribute significantly to the Ugandan economy. But I think these will likely do quite a lot and be able to export to Africa. then I see the FCTA as an opportunity for us to industrialize. Industrialization has eluded us over the decades. We did a study sometime back for the last 50 years, and we are going into deindustrialization. But we think this new opportunity will help us to style up and industrialize. Why do I say like that? Once we go into light manufacturing, we'll be able to export. Right now, Uganda does quite a lot in terms of exporting to the Congo, in terms of exporting South Sudan and our neighbors. I know we are competing with India, like in the steel industry. We are competing with others in the cement industry, but these are areas that you think that we are likely to break through if we work hard in this direction. Women have been pointed out as some of the people who have really struggled when it comes to trade. 70% of the traders on informal trade are these people who are in agriculture. What do I see in as far as they are concerned? I see simplified regimes for them with the trade facilitation to be able to cross the border, sell their stuff, and then come back. The same thing to the youth. We have a youth bulge in Africa. Youth dividends. How do we harvest these young people who are redundant right now instead of going to control activities? These are areas where I think the Continental Free Trade Area will help us quite a lot. We are so much into substance kind of economy. I think with the FCTA, we are likely to see that portion of the economy shrinking in as far as production is concerned. There are so many opportunities for value addition of some of the things we produce right now. Cross-border trade is one area with a lot of challenges which will be resolved in this. With simplified rules of origin, trade facilitation and compliance will be able to be dealt with. Of course, that said, there are definitely some challenges that will come along, which are in form of adjustment costs, in form of, if we are not competitive enough, some of our factories will be thrown out of joint. That one, the Uganda Manufacturers Association has to take that into consideration. So the triangle I talked about, it helps us to put in perspective what we need to do as government, like the other speakers have said. And I want to underline this. We are not going to sign these agreements and come home and relax and say, hooray, we have got it. They would have got it wrong. We need very strong strategies, very well calculated strategies with the financial backup to be able to do that. We need to move out there. We can't just sit and rejoice. This is a play field. Others will benefit. Some will not be able to benefit. Depends on how you play in this field. I'll stop there for the meantime.
Thank you so much. We'll be coming back to you. Dr. Birungi, I know for some of the manufacturers, when you talk about such a huge market, it is happiness, but also fact that the market of Uganda is also going to be opened up for products from other countries, sometimes of more superior quality, or they have more capacity in terms of production and everything, is a fear for them. How are you grasping the CFTA as Uganda Manufacturers Association?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mildred. And thank you too for the PhD you've bestowed upon me. I do appreciate it. Yes, my name is Daniel Birungi. I'm not a doctor yet.
Yeah, yes,
but, thank you for prophesying. Yes, to your question, we do recognize that as we talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area, it goes two ways. That as other countries open up for the possibilities of our products getting into their markets, there's also the risk inherent that products from other countries are definitely coming into our country. Now, one of the key things that we've been preaching, and I'm glad the PS mentioned it as well, is the aspect of competitiveness. Competitiveness begins with what we do at home, what we do in Uganda. Competitiveness begins with understanding and getting hold of a leaderboard analysis that tells us where we lie in terms of competitiveness structure. One of the key drivers of competitiveness for many of the industries is cost of power. Frankly, we are moving in the right direction, but there's still a lot of ways to go, especially when you understand that at that moment, you're in competition with someone from Ethiopia getting power at 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. We are only aiming for 5. That is the key challenge. When we speak about then the aspect also of, sorry, my glasses are misting. When we talk about the aspect of tax structure, it's another element that we need to be mindful about, because the taxes that are imposed locally on some of these products come back to haunt us at the point of export. Talk about the local taxes like excise duty. Talk about our VAT rate, which is at 18%. Neighboring Kenya is at 16%. Now, it's important, it's critical that as we start discussing access to markets beyond Uganda, we also then look at ourselves and say, okay, here we are struggling, here we are probably doing well, there's a challenge. The other one, of course, is standards. You've mentioned it, and everyone has mentioned it, the aspect of quality. What level of quality are we pushing for? And we have a twofold idea on quality. One area is that as a country, we certainly need to benchmark our standards to the best in class, because as best in class, you can enter any market without any discussion, because you already fit the profile. But the second bit, and this is where the national conspiracy discussion that the previous speaker was talking about comes in, we need to think about assisting our potential markets in standards development. If we go to the DRC and understand that there's a challenge on capacity in development of standards, what is to stop our standards body from assisting them in developing standards that then dovetail with the standards back home, because then we are king of the hill as we get into that country. So these are some of the immediate discussions that we need to have, even as we think of the 450 billion. How do we develop the capacity of the local entrepreneur? How do we address the aspect that today we're talking about taking milk to Algeria, but we cannot get it to Rwanda? How do we talk about the aspect that today we're talking about taking sugar to South Africa, but it can't go to Tanzania? Dispute resolution. I'm glad that the Secretary General spoke about that aspect as well, but we need to emphasize these issues if we are to be realistically in place to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Thank you, Mildred.
Thank you. And when, well, I called you doctor because I was talking to many doctors and I prophesy as well. Dr. Isaac, I come back to you. When you talk about the free trade area, one of the key issues that Dr. Joy as well talked about is understanding it. Many a times when we have such discussions and agreements, the common person thinks it's government, it's the policymakers, and yet at the end of the day, they are affected directly. We're thinking about having this understood by that woman in Kalere Market, by that farmer down in a village, a remote village that is farming produce that could likely end up on the same market. But also, the government gets into the discussion of losing revenue at some point in time, because there's some taxes that you have to forego because you are dealing with an entire huge market and you have agreed to some particular aspects in the agreement. How do we get to address these two key issues? Government's fear of losing revenue, for example, Uganda, which is still a small, country that is also depending on loans to be able to finance itself, but also the entire idea being grasped by everyone. Omuntu wa wansi in Uganda's perspective.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, I'll start with revenue. We did a study about a year ago as part of our work to support our frontliners in negotiations. And actually, figures indicated that Uganda, by joining the FCTS, first of all, was going to make a loss of about $13 million. This was a study we did. Kenya, I think, was 14, but we're not going to talk about Kenya, let's talk about Uganda. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. We will lose the $13 million at the border as the goods enter, all right? But we will generate a lot of trade, which will generate more revenue than the $13 million. And I think that's what we need to understand as either policymakers or people engaged in this whole process. Whenever we go for negotiations, it's well known, it's textbook knowledge, that you lose revenue. Yeah. But when you look at the end of the day, what you gain through, of course, that is customs duty. But there are others like excise. There are others like VAT, which will still be collected on the same commodities, the products that are coming in. So as long as we have goods coming in from other countries and a lot of trade going on, we will be able to perhaps even get more than the $13 million we are talking about. So to me, or for a critical analyst, that should not be a problem for us. If only Uganda can trade up to 30% and import perhaps from Africa even more than what's importing, this $13 million is not a problem. We should not worry about that. So just take an example. If so many farms come up and are paying pay-as-you-earn and are paying corporate tax and other taxes, this will be resolved. So that should be a rested case. On the issue of how do we get everybody on board, and I think this is where we need to think very critically. Who are the players on this? Within the academic world, we will sound our bell by writing papers, by doing that. There will be also the ministry doing its role to inform the rest of the community. But the business community through its associations like Uganda Manufacturer Association, the likes of Kasita, Usia, and others should get positioned and ready to have this whole big thing broken down so that they can run with it and be able to inform the rest of the community. And I think creation of awareness has been one of our weaknesses, because we look at even the ES, people asking what is in for us? Yet they are buying things from Kenya without citizen taxes, yet they can move into Kenya without encumbrances. They don't realize that they're already what? Benefiting. That means we have not done sufficiently in trying to educate the population. So we need to get up. We need to get up and inform people and sensitize people and do whatever we can. If we can get resources for that, so be it. If the ministry can try what it can, so be. Everybody has to run with this vision. You know, for those who are old enough in Kampala, they used to do what you call duka duka. You run. When things have gone wrong, everybody is running in every direction. We need to get a duka duka of a sort where everybody is running with this vision. When COVID came, we even went to places of prayer. And the clergy were helping us to educate the people, isn't it? So why can't we do this with this as well? We take this message everywhere. We teach it in universities. There should be courses teaching. I'm appalled. In Makere, we are not doing a lot in terms of regional integration, perhaps. We need to teach so that our young people are moving from the universities are aware of this. So it's going to be everybody's effort, but somebody has to lead. Government has to lead everybody on and bring everybody on board to be able to get everybody to know what's going. We even have, I think, civil society organizations in this country that are engaged in all these activities. Let everybody come on board.
All right, thank you very much. Coming back to you, Daniel, and as I speak to Daniel, I'll request my colleague Ben Mwine to just get prepared for our plenary session in the next few. Looking at the statistics by the African Development Bank, they did look at about 80% of Africa's space filled up by small and medium enterprises, micro, small, and medium enterprises, which is not very different from what Uganda has. And in this, there is always the context of, having the capacity. It could be financial capacity or even technical capacity. And I want to bring this in the context of the 10 value chains that Dr. Joy talked about. Do we have a comparative advantage? Are we looking inward to gain from this as Uganda through the Uganda Manufacturers Association?
One thing that I need to point out is that history in Uganda has shown us that where opportunity presents itself, private sector will innovate to get into the opportunity. I'll give you two examples. One is early on, Makerere University, the leading university here, did not have a private sponsorship scheme. It was wholly government. When government announced the introduction of private sponsorship, and there was a realization that there was lack of adequate housing within the university, private sector quickly went into hostels. Hostels mushroomed around Makerere, and now you can't say you don't have anywhere to sleep. Opportunity two, South Sudan. When South Sudan opened up, there were no hotels of any nature, of a serious nature. People tell me that when they went to South Sudan the first time, they slept in tents near the runway at the airport. It wasn't because they did not want comfort, but the opportunity presented by South Sudan was so big that there was no question about whether to go or not. Now, to your question, readiness, I think, can be had. A couple of things that need to be solved. And for me, in a nutshell, the discussion here is around infrastructure on two categories. There's the soft infrastructure and there's the hard infrastructure. On the soft infrastructure side, we do understand that the nearest potential markets for Uganda at the moment are our immediate neighbors. Speaking to the African Continental Free Trade Area, I would hazard a guess that DRC and South Sudan would be the new entrants, because in any case we've been in the EAC along the same terms. But if you look at the two, there is something that ties them together. They're inherently risky environments to get into. And one of the key elements is de-risking entry into these markets. How do we do that? One way is to have an export guarantee insurance scheme that then says, Daniel, if you're going into Congo, buy this insurance. If anything happens, we will pay. We will take the risk off you. That then saves government from having to incur costs of refunding losses, as is the case now for those who went into South Sudan. Number two is around export readiness as a key element. You do not wake up in the morning and put items in your bag and go to Congo to sell or go to Malawi to sell. It's a process. You have to be taken through the steps of understanding the market, appreciating the needs in that market, and then developing your capacity to enter that market. An export readiness program is critical. For the bigger boys, they are already exporting into these markets, so it's not a problem. But like you've said, we are predominantly SME. How will a woman doing maths in Uganda, which are required in Nigeria, be able to appreciate the things she needs to do in order to enter that market? We need export readiness training. The third within that element is language. In Uganda, we pride ourselves in being multilingual because we know English and our local language. But our local language has not been exported beyond our borders, which means if I'm going to Guinea, I'm going to a French-speaking country, I'm going to be unable to communicate. That is a key element. And I think as a key discussion, even as we start now, we should be involving the Ministry of Education in these discussions to say, look, French must be taught, Portuguese must be taught, Arabic must be taught, Chinese for that matter, but for the African continent, I think French, Arabic, Portuguese are key. That we are able, as Ugandans, to stand in any country and say, look, what do you want to trade? We can speak to you about trading in your language. There's a key strength in being able to do that. The other bit on the soft infrastructure is finance. And I think several of the speakers have talked about it, that access to finance remains a key challenge. Export preparation, market development, review of policies out there take money. Today, the average SME is going to borrow at 18, 20, 22%. That is not sustainable. Discussions on reducing interest rates are critical as we have discussions on market entry, because then access to credit is eased. Market opacity, and someone spoke about it. We need to capacitate the Export Development Board to be able to tell us where the opportunity is, what the gap between our capacity and that opportunity is, and how to bridge the two. Because without that gap analysis, we are speaking to ourselves when we speak about access to some of these markets. I'll quickly run to the bigger discussions on the hard infrastructure.
Okay.
On hard infrastructure, I would say that we appreciate and we acknowledge the work of the government, especially as it relates to the DRC in terms of opening up export roads. It's a step in the right direction. However, we still have some challenges, and these challenges are challenges that are not insurmountable. One is that even as we do that, we allow our goods to get into Congo through the new roads we've built. The challenge still remains that today, for an average trader coming from the DRC, they're going to carry money on them to come to roofings, to come to Mukwano, to buy their product. One, it's risky. Two, it's unhygienic. Three, it means that the KCBs of this world or the banks of this world that have presence in Kenya and the DRC are able to take the trade that would have come to Uganda and quickly run with it to wherever they're able to convert the funds quickly. We need to be able to incentivize the centenaries of this world, the DFC of this world, to be able to set up in these countries, because then we have a homegrown entity there able to support us. 2 is border infrastructure. I'm glad to hear about the opening up of the border markets at Impondwe. It's a positive step. But we're saying the other big issue is warehousing. Warehousing for products that are bulky. You do not want your iron sheets coming all the way from Kampala. You do not want your tons and tons of grain coming all the way to Kampala. You need grain silos, you need warehouses, you need cold storage facilities at the borders so that you can quickly feed whoever needs product. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to be the country that creates the roads that become a transit hub for the rest of Africa while we look on. We need to be at the border so that we beat everyone coming into our country to the punch. Third would, of course, be rail. I think everyone has talked about the impact rail has had in other nations. We need to talk critical about improving our existing rail network, moving to the standard gauge railway, but also, and this goes to the continental level, we need to discuss what is the gauge for Africa. In Tanzania alone, there are 4 different gauges of rail. That does not speak to harmonizing and connecting the whole African continent. We need to speak about saying, look, as Africa, we've gone for meter gauge or whatever it is, so that connectivity becomes easy. Otherwise, in solving one problem, we create another problem of warehousing and now exchanging trains as we get to the borders. The last one is on our products, such as milk, such as meat, the animal products. Today, you'll be very surprised to get into a Congolese supermarket and find that the milk comes from Norway or Belgium. It is not ideal. It's not that we do not have milk in Uganda, that we do not have meat in Uganda. It's that we have not put in place the infrastructure to support exit of this meat. And what do I mean here? I mean trade-sensitive disease control and quarantine measures and areas, so that within the country, we are quickly able to demonstrate that we are able to solve the issue of, is your meat safe? Is your milk safe? And even as we do that, the final bit is then we get to leverage the likes of Uganda Air Cargo, the likes of Uganda Airlines, to say, as we wait for the Trans-African highways to take shape, we can airlift product from Uganda to areas that would otherwise be hard to reach. At that point, I think we would have cracked it and we would be where we need to be. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Virunji. A round of applause for our panelists. We'll be going for our, our plenary, but while Mr. Virunji was speaking, I think he pointed to the fact that research shows that when you look at, for example, EU, their intra-trade with regard to food products and agricultural products is at about 72%. But when you look at African intra-trade in agricultural products, we are at 13% or even less. Ms. Elsie here was asking that the other day, when we look at countries like Cote d'Ivoire as being one of the major exporters of cocoa, or producers rather, when you go in Cote d'Ivoire and look for, chocolate made from Cote d'Ivoire, it will probably be even a little bit harder for you. Same here. We walk into supermarkets and we're looking for products from Italy, UK, and all that, and yet we're not thinking about Africa. Ben, I think we'll be taking on questions. We'll be taking on supplements coming through, and well, I do have Ben Winnie with the microphone. Ben, take it up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mildred, and good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. A wonderful first day so far of discussions that we have had, and to everyone who's joining us online. We know that we can't all be together because of COVID restrictions, of course. We'd like to encourage you to continue the conversation online. You've had some brilliant things being said here. How do we have this conversation beyond where we are? The hashtags to use are UG for AFCFTA or UG AFCFTA Week. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but it should be easy. The F is small. Please do remember that and let us know what you think. We'd like to hear from you. We only have about 12 minutes before we end our TV broadcast, and so we want to make sure that we give as many people an opportunity to have their 20 seconds of fame and to show us the brilliance as we prepare for the FCFTA. You know, being on TV is not a very simple thing. It makes you, Honorable Minister knows, you must take advantage of it. So what I'm going to do is ask for the people who are in the room, if you want to ask a question or say anything, we still have Dr. Joy Kategekwa, one of the most brilliant minds this country has produced online, to answer any questions. You put up your hand, I'll come to you, give you a second microphone, and then you can tell us your name and make your question or comment. I will insist and request that we keep that to under 1 minute so we can have as many people as possible say something before we wrap up for day one. If not, we still have, of course, tomorrow and Friday to have deliberation. So please do put up your hands. I'll come to you, and then we'll go around and try and get some thoughts. Remember, tell us your name, what you do, and try and keep your question or comments to under a minute.
You talked of meat production, milk, fruits, probably thinking of taking these factories closer to where the market is, rather than export them from distant areas. I just thought of that as an idea. Secondly, how do you avoid disappointments among the producers? For example, in the past, we have had the government encourage the population to produce vanilla, and at some point there was no market for vanilla. So those are some of the challenges I foresee in terms of setbacks. I can stop here for now.
Thank you so much. I will kindly suggest that we don't go to a secondly or third, so we can try and get as many people around the room as possible. Let me come to resident for the FAO. Please go ahead, and then we'll go around the room. Yes, it's on. You just need to be, you can try and scream a little bit. Just press that small button over there. You can use mine.
Thank you, Ben. I noticed you have cut your hair. But for Elsie, thank you for the opportunity. And my name is Antonio Querido. I'm from FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. So you will be not surprised that I will defend my lady here, the agriculture, because I strongly believe that this experiment of Continental Free Trade Area, agriculture can make it or break it. Yeah. It is within the agriculture sector that we do have the potential to push for more integration. What we have seen so far is that we've been exporting the easy ones. Coffee, cocoa, tea, spices, but we are a net food importer. And the trade area provides an opportunity also for us to address the challenge that we have in terms of food insecurity within our continent, but at the same time to lift many out of poverty. For Uganda to become a food basket of this continent, of course, we have to move away of business as usual. It will not happen unless we invest seriously in agricultural transformation, where I see the link with the NDP agro-industrialization program for us to produce high commodities to be traded and also to be competitive on the continental scale. Not only on the sub-region, but on the continental scale. But I think you have touched a number of areas that are important. The transport and logistics, the distribution aspect, the ICT that is quite important, but also the finance dimension is critical for us to create an enabling environment for the agriculture sector to provide these opportunities. FAO has worked with the African Union Commissioner to provide a framework to boost the trading on agriculture commodities and service. We are also ready to support Uganda when it comes to standards, safety and standards. The quality will be important for us to be able to trade, and because quality is of paramount importance. I will probably stay here, but when we come to the infrastructure, storage is important, but also quality control in terms of the labs here is also important for us to boost the agriculture trade. Other areas too are equally important.
Sorry to rush you, Antonio. It's always a delight to hear you speak. Can I kindly suggest for the rest of us that you please stand up so we can be able to see you a bit better? And we had our lunch is interfering with the mic frequencies, so if you can stand, it will be a bit clearer.
Thank you very much, Ben. With my height, I think it's important that I stand up. I look at the, my name is Dennis Aguma. I'm the Executive Director for NACE Africa, and we work with very many young entrepreneurs. We see Uganda and leveraging the Africa Free Continental Trade Area by being innovative and creative in order to be able to compete on the global market. Recently, we were very privileged to have been invited along the resident representative and a group of Ugandans that they talked about to go to Ghana and see what they're doing. We've been blown away by what's happening in Ghana, but it's not that we can't level up. So I look at this issue in 3 ways: short term, medium, and long term. We are here right now. The long term I can't deal with. The medium term we might deal with. I also look at it in hardcore aspects such as physical infrastructure, which the government has to deal with, but I also look at it from a softcore aspects, skills and awareness. And here you have 2 key groups, women and youth, and I think they've been touched on. But many of the young people that we're dealing with at the moment have no idea what we're talking about. And I think you did mention that. So how do we produce young Ugandans who are very entrepreneurial, but thinking of an Africa First strategy? So that if you're in Kabale doing those sweet potatoes and you're cutting your crisps and you're thinking about a Ghanaian market, how do we actually do that? I think education is one of those that we talked about. But is it possible, for instance, to have a sustained campaign for like 5 years and drill it in the heads of these young people? So that if you're thinking long-term strategy, someone growing up right now, in about 10 years' time, that is the guy that's going to be exporting our African products. If they have an Africa First mindset, we are likely to have a step ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aguma. Mindset change is a very big thing that we need to push. Let's get some ladies into the mix. We'll start there, and then we'll come over here to our bankers, and then we'll come back to the gentleman before we hand back over to Mildred. Again, Maurice did say TV time is not elastic. It's not Ugandan time, so we want to make sure that we show the African way of doing things properly by finishing on time.
Thank you so much, our moderator. My name is Blessing Omcha Immaculate. I'm the Acting Secretary General for Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I would like to comment just one thing about the discussion today. My question is, we are talking about these markets that we're opening up, and it's a very, very good opportunity for all of us. But I would like to comment on what the doctor said. He said that it is a good thing because we are bringing in a lot of revenue for the government. But how do we get to balance bringing in a lot of revenue for the government and also sustaining our local industries and making sure that in the essence of importing a lot of things, we are not drowning our own people? Then the last one is, how do we involve the young people? We keep saying that the young people and the women, but all the discussions that we actually have are centered around the people that get to have these discussions, the information that gets to be shared out. You don't see the representation of the young people. So we need to actually stretch out and get to involve young people into the discussions that we are having so that they become our ambassadors. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Blessing. Again, for reiteration, I'm going to point out that we would like you to pick the most important point you want to make. I don't want to have to embarrass you on TV by yanking the microphone from you, so please spare me that temptation by keeping it to a point. So we'll come to you and then we'll come to the gentleman over here. Let's start with the lady and then we'll come to you.
Banking, which also comes with trade fight. Thank you very much for all the deliberations. Mine is just a comment that we saw a lot of disruption in the trade value chain during COVID, and the one key thing that came out is the inability of trade is really in SMEs, and if we are to get the SMEs to participate, we need to digitize, and I pray that we start thinking about digitization early enough, and in doing so, it will make it easy for the banks to be able to provide funding, because when you digitize, we're able to see the flow, and so we can support along. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. I should point out she's leading by example. If you're a Standard Chartered account holder, you'll know that they only have, I think, 3 branches operational now. They've basically shut down everything and gone digital all the way. So it seems to be the way things are going. So we'll come to you and then come to Nelson. We have a farmer who has to speak on construction, and then the very key, and then we'll hand back to Mildred. Again, please do keep it very brief so we can wrap up early.
Thank you so much, moderator. It has been a wonderful discussion. What we need to know, let's start walking the talk. There is a lot of institutional disconnectivity amongst ourselves. The public somewhere, the private somewhere. Dr. Isaac, in your triangle, you are forgetting academia. Unless the quality and standard we are talking about is also put within that triangle, that's when we can get the quality and the standard desired on the African market. Number 3, about the policy makers. I'm sorry to note, unless the sectoral associations are established, all strengthened, that's when the message can sink down to the ground people, and then we get the information we need, then export readiness can be realized. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I should also point out, as we go around the room, I know we are trying to rush things a little bit, but again, this is a reminder that this is just the beginning of the discussion. This is just the beginning, and it continues not only tomorrow and Friday for the rest of the events that we are doing in this room, but online, in the media, and these are discussions that are going to take us into a place where we see the implementation of this wonderful thing called the FCFTA. So I'll come to the farmer, I'll come to construction, and then we'll finish with our economist, and then hand over back to Mildred.
Thank you very much. My name is Edward Makovore. I work with the Uganda National Farmers Federation. My comment and my observation today is not very encouraging, unfortunately, because apart from our FAO representative, we do not see the side of government in charge of agriculture. I do not see the Minister of Agriculture, I don't see the Permanent Secretary, and yet agriculture sector accounts for 70% of the exports. It would be very encouraging to see the agriculture stakeholders being very pivotal in these discussions. As we discuss this, we have not even seen commitment of government to honoring the 2003 Maputo Declaration, where they decided to commit 10%. So how are we going to move if the key stakeholders, the agriculture sector, are not part of this? And two, how are we going to move if, since 2003, we have failed to commit 10% to the sector?
Thank you, Mr. Makovere. I should have warned, for the AFCFTA week, we are only accepting positivity. So I should have had a shot with Mr. Makovere. I understand your concerns. The reason we're having this discussion this week and going forward is that we're saying, look, whatever has happened has happened. What are we doing now to work around that and make sure that we make this thing work, right? So I do hear the concerns, but the question now is, what do we do in terms of discussing the positivity going forward? Mr. Oware, and then we'll come to construction and finally to Mr. Pillai before we hand back to Mildred. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Nelson Tugume, coffee farmer. And one, I'm going to say 2 things for FCTA. Big opportunity. 2 things. Strategy, strategy, strategy. The second one, industrialization. industrialization, industrialization. And I finally say this. We fought for peace in South Sudan. We saw our people come out and run away because they were selling chapatis, they were selling eggs, they were doing border borders. When the big men came in there, they said, "Sir, can we give you an industry of water? And we shall give you money from KCB, Equity Bank, to put your industry." And they started selling water. Strategy, strategy, strategy.
Thank you very much, Nelson. If I wasn't getting my morning coffee from the juicer in Nintendo, I was going to fine you for talking longer than I had allowed. But since you served my breakfast, I'll forgive you. Let's hear from construction, and then we'll come to the economist finally.
Thank you, thank you. My name is David. I'm from National Housing, construction sector. I'm happy at least to be here, and I've heard the phase 2, which was announced by His Excellency Mene, about the services which are included in phase 2 and those which are excluded. In Uganda, I don't know how many construction companies are exporting services out. Maybe 0. It is an opportunity that we package ourselves and see us exporting construction service out, and should be prioritized in the phase 2. Honorable Minister talked about it, and it is important we support our local industries. If we don't support, we're not moving. We are churning out so many professionals, so many children, and construction is the largest employer. Just one site alone can employ more than 500 people. What about a road? So what would that mean to us? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. My name is Tangavel Palanivel. People call me Palani. I am Senior Economic Advisor at the UNDP office. I worked extensively in Asia based on the Asian experience, because Asia has a comprehensive experience on kind of unlocking the trade area. Based on that, I wanted to give only 2 lessons for Uganda, Africa. The one is the importance of integrated implementation of various thematic strategy. Like, you definitely need very dynamic agriculture, no doubt about, as my colleague said, but you also, there are colleagues suggested also industrialization. But mere agriculture or mere strong industrialization or high value industrialization is not sufficient. So we need a more competitive exchange rate regime, very, robust investment financing regime, and we also need more sustainable mineral sector development. So the kind of the trade is not like one sector, 2 sector. Uganda, Africa has comparative advantage in a number of areas. How do you actually implement, take into the consideration of a competitive exchange rate regime, very robust investment regime, also dynamic agriculture industrializations in a more competitive way? So therefore, the importance of integrated strategy and implementing integrated way is important one. The second lesson is that, again from the Asia, like the trade actually depends upon the international competitiveness. Like, it's not good actually how much potential you have, but it's basically it's a competitive regime. How compared to other neighboring countries, you could export your agricultural, whatever agriculture, whether it's maize or coffee or whatever it is. So therefore, you have to look into that, the kind of the competitive situations. Fortunately, I looked into that actually last few days. There is a global ranking on the competitive areas by the, earlier used to do the World Bank, now the World Economic Forum. If you look into that, last 10 years, Uganda made a huge progress, huge improvement in improving the competitive actually area, the international competitive. Despite such improvement, the unfortunate situation that still Uganda is below to some of the neighboring competitive ranking or the score, like Tanzania, Rwanda, or Kenya kind of countries. So therefore, I would actually highlight that the importance of focusing much more significantly on the global competitiveness of Uganda is important one if you really wanted to move beyond on the trade area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, just to reiterate that today is just the beginning. one of the important things is that everyone who is in this room with us has been invited because you are our ambassador. And so please, on behalf of the Honorable Minister and the UN country rep and the UNDP country rep, I confer upon you the title of ambassadors of the AFCFTA. So please go forth and preach this gospel wherever you go. But again, this conversation begins now. It continues beyond here. I would like to encourage you to continue that, not only here online in the groups where you are, because that person from your village is going to be the beneficiary from this. The stats that Mildred has been pointing out on our panel just highlights the magnitude of what this thing can do to transform our country and our continent. So we'll continue this. Of course, we have tomorrow and Friday and beyond. For now, though, I'll hand over to Mildred to get some final thoughts from our panel as we wrap up day one for today. Thank you.
Definitely. A round of applause for Ben and all the discussants. Brilliant questions, brilliant discussions that are coming through. It definitely spells out a bright future for Africa as a whole. But just before we get to conclude, allow me to get a minute each for final thought from our panelists. And I'll start off with Dr. Joy, who is online. Dr. Joy, if you are still with us. I know we're wrapping up day one, but your final thoughts on this for Uganda particularly, but also Africa as a whole, as we now move to implementation.
Yes, thank you very much, Mildred. 4 points stick out. The first one is JHD, so prepare. The second point is Duka AFCFT. I think the gentleman was right when he said everybody has a role to play. So Duka AFCFT, what is your role? The third point is we have to put a foot on the pedal of productive capacity. All the questions that were raised, the perspectives are really about what shall we export and to what scale. Therefore, a foot on the pedal of productive capacity is important. And there, it's about energy, transport, digital, connectivity, logistics, and financing. The final point, mindsets. We must make in Africa, we must build in Africa, but we must embrace Africa, vote for it with our money. And so the mindset that indeed this is our chance to transform the continent is an important one. Thank you very much, Mildred.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Joy. A round of applause for her. And we will also now go to Dr. Isaac. Your final thoughts. It's just the beginning, of course.
Thank you. Basically, I think we need to draw very candid strategies to be able to do this. One thing that we have not so much delved into in this meeting is e-commerce. Put the frameworks in place to facilitate e-commerce. Because this is still weak at even WTO level. We don't have a framework at that level. So countries have standalone. So can Africa have its own standalone kind of clauses regarding e-commerce? Because this is extremely important. We've talked about infrastructure. I think we need to think, because we can't do all these things without requisite infrastructure. And finally, just a comment on agriculture. At the African level, there is the CADA process. All right, that has a scorecard after every 2 years. After the Maputo, now we are talking about Malabo Declaration. I'm part of that process. I think we need to strengthen this at national level to be able to invest a lot to enhance productivity, because our fertilizer utilization right now is about, I think, 2 kilograms per hectare or so. This is very dismal. So we need to go into that. Given that we don't have much time, I'll stop at that. Thank you so much, moderator, and ladies and gentlemen.
All right, and to you, Mr. Birungi, your final take.
Thank you very much, Mildred, and thanks to all the intercedents. One is preparation. The African Continental Free Trade Area opportunity is not an event, it's a marathon. As a country, we need to work together, be it private sector, public sector, academia, name it, to develop the right strategies in order to access the market that is before us. Otherwise, we shall be left in the annals of history as having seen it. It came, it passed us, and we waved at it as it went to the next country. That's one. Number two is that even as we speak about strategy and preparation, one of the new PSST keeps saying that Uganda has developed all policies and programs except the policy and program on implementation. We need to talk about having strategized, we need to talk about how we implement, and we need to measure progress on implementation. At the end of the year, when my PS is asking for a budget vote, she should be asked to say, okay, how many new exports have you generated? But not only her, everyone, including private sector. If we are serious about exporting, we all have to keep exports as a key benchmark of progress in each of our organizations. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Lastly, but not least, the issue of building capacities. And this, I go back to the issue of local content, buy Uganda, build Uganda. At the end of the day, Daniel is not going to wake up tomorrow and start exporting. He's going to start by selling products to you, most of the times. Now, we need to develop the capacity of industries, of entities, of businesses and SMEs to supply the local market, to supplement imports, to increase their capacity, because then they get the stepping stone to go to the continental level. If we do not do that, we are still lying to ourselves. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Virunji. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a round of applause to the panelists and to yourselves for coming through. Like Ben said, this is just the beginning. It's day one. Now, in tomorrow's discussion, especially on the panel, we will now be unpacking, looking at what opportunities there are for Uganda, but how we can be able to grasp those opportunities. Mr. Virunji was talking about passing over opportunity. For me, I describe POOR as an acronym of passing over opportunity repeatedly, and that we've continuously done as Africa, that we continue to pass over opportunities repeatedly. How do we grasp this one and not have a discussion of it was, but it did not happen. It was meant to, but it actually did not happen. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Let's continue the discussion. Online key aspects that have come through, of course, ICT and e-commerce are very key. I think this would also be able to deal with aspects of language barrier that you were talking about. Infrastructure, preparation, looking at exports as a benchmark of progress. The other day, the president was complaining about Uganda being a supermarket of goods from foreign countries. How do we become a supermarket of African goods and Ugandan goods that are not just African and Ugandan, but of very good quality? Ladies and gentlemen, we bring our panel to the close at this particular point in time, and allow me to invite back Morris Mugisha to wind up.
Thank you, Mildred, and your panel. Please do feel free to take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an academic session that was quite exciting, with examples from across the continent. It's exciting that technology allows us to present ourselves from New York. So we had somebody in New York around this time last year. No, I think 2020, okay, 2020. Okay, not 2020, but 2020. We would have been, in February or January, would have been wondering how to get Joy into this room, but would have her here physically. So we miss you, Joy. It would be nice to have you here with us. We want to appreciate all of you for being part of day one, a great, exciting conversation. This is just the beginning. We are here tomorrow and Friday. In fact, your weekend begins here at the Serena. We are still engaging the hotel to give you good rates so you can spend the night on Friday. So this was day one. Tomorrow is day two. We'll be looking at positioning Uganda to benefit from the CFTA. We have a great conversation. The sitting arrangement will look different because we have a wide panel. They definitely will have more time. And we are very gender sensitive, so we'll also be looking at that issue of gender. Mildred also helps in looking, the panel looking a bit different. And we will begin with lunch at 12:30. So mine is to request all of you to be here early so we can have lunch together and network, and then we can sit here together at exactly 2 p.m. so we can start. Again, this will be telecast live on UBC and NBS. We want to thank our broadcast partners who gave us extra time after 5. So thank you so much. And then we'll also ensure that we provide you with all the necessary information that we can. And so we've prepared for you. On behalf of the Ministry of Trade and on behalf of UNDP, I want to thank you for being part of this day one. And also on behalf of myself, Mildred and Ben, we thank you for joining us. Coffee has been served, so don't leave it here. We wanted to thank you for being with us. So you now deserve a coffee. and it's Ugandan coffee. Well, let's begin there, Elsie. It's Ugandan coffee, not Nescafe. It's Ugandan coffee. Nelson will be happy to hear that it's Ugandan coffee. It's Ugandan coffee. And please do enjoy our coffee and Ugandan tea as we depart. And please come and join us tomorrow. As I said, you can see the minister is still with us. There'll be several other ministers here, including herself here tomorrow. So please do come and join in this fantastic conversation. Good evening.
Your soul. People will go like to quench your soul. And don't use that shit to put you for jail. And don't turn my shit to expensive shit. My shit na exhibit, he must not lose you. And don't turn my shit to expensive shit. My shit na exhibit, he must not lose you.